Hey guys, welcome back. As a programmer, in this video we're gonna build a real-time private messaging app. So we're gonna use WebSockets to achieve this real-time communication, and specifically we'll use Socket.io library. Before I show you the demo, just know that in the last video we have built this full stack threads clone, which is a social media application. We have added a lot of features, and now we're gonna add this chat application on top of it. If you would like to see how we built this app, feel free to check that previous video and then come back to this. Or if you just want to see the process of building this chat app, then you can continue with this video. Okay, now let's take a look at the end result or the demo, and then we'll start the coding. Now I am in the home page. As we can see, we have this additional chat icon that I have added in this part. So when we click to that, we're going to see this chat page, as we can see from the URL, and on the left hand side we're going to have our conversations as well as this search box, which I will get into in a second. And then on the right hand side we have this kind of like a box. So when we select the conversation, it will change to this box and it will fetch all of our messaging history with this Elon Musk. Or if you go to chat with the Jennifer, it's going to be the same. So let's just test it out if it is real time or not. I will open up a new tab in the incognito mode. So I'll just say localhost and I will put them side by side. So this one is going to be on the right hand side and this one is going to be on the left. So this account is logged in as John, okay? And on the right hand side, let's just log in as Elon Musk. So password is from 1 to 6, as we can see. Now, when I click this login, just take a look at here. We're going to get a online status icon. Okay, so I'll just log in. And immediately, like real time, it has been to this like online status. Now let's go to here, and as you can see, John Doe is also online because here we're logged in as John. So as you can see, this is also responsive. When you hit this breakpoint, it is side by side, but when you just hit this endpoint, it's gonna be so its flex direction is gonna become to calling. Okay, let's just make this like this. Okay, so I will just select this conversation, and here let's just also select Elon Musk, and remember this is John, so John is gonna say, hey Elon, maybe what's up. So I'll just send this, and immediately it's gonna refresh here also, like we can see the messages coming like in real time, and I'll say doing good, what about you? If we just send this, it's gonna be both here and then here. Now let's go on the left hand side. I will just log out from this Elon Musk account, and this green dot should be disappear. Okay, I'll just click to that. Now we are logged out and Elon Musk is not online anymore. Okay, and then here we have this search box. So let's try to message to Zuckerberg. So I'll just say Zuckerberg, and if I just press enter, it's gonna add it to here, and we can just click it and send some messages. Okay, maybe we could say hi, and then here so since we are logged in as John, so let's search for ourselves, and we're gonna get an error. It's just gonna say you cannot message yourself. Or let's say we search a user that does not exist, and it's gonna say user not found. And also let's try to message to Jennifer, which we already have a conversation with. So if I search it, it's gonna immediately open up our like search box, message box. And as I said before, so this application is completely responsive. So let's just shrink our screen, and it's just gonna adjust itself depending on that. And I think it just works fine up until like 300 pixels, which is kind of like one of the smallest fonts. And with this, now we have another message from this dude called as a programmer, and he just says that please bro, subscribe to my channel bro, please. Okay, so he's kind of like suffering because you're not subscribed to channel. Let's just make him happy and subscribe to channel, right? And now let's get into coding. So I have opened up the project in VS Code, and we have this front end and back end folders, which are coming from that previous video I mentioned. If you want to see how we built this from scratch, you can find the link in the description. So first we're gonna just build the entire UI, okay, entire design for the chat page, and then we'll just add our functionalities. So I'll just open up a new terminal, and I will split that into two, and on the left I will just say cd f, and then I'll press tab so that it will autocomplete to front end, and then I'll say npm run dev, and on the right hand side we'll just say cd backend and then npm run dev. and it's hopefully going to connect to server, I mean DB, and then start the server. Okay, now it is done. I can just shrink this and let's test it out in localhost if our application is work. Okay, so it's working. And then now here, so first we want to add this chat icon into, oops, okay, so we're just gonna add it, that chat icon, into header. So I'll go inside the components. I will say header.jsx. Okay, so if we have a user that is logged in, we're just gonna add another icon. I will duplicate this and we're gonna have inside the to route, it's gonna take us to the chat page, and the icon that we're going to have is gonna be ps fill chat code fill. It should be uppercase, I think, like this. And then size, let's say it's gonna be 20, and let's import this at the top, which is gonna be coming from React Icons. Okay, we can save this and let's take a look. It's working, it's here. Now let's add that route. It's gonna be inside the app.jsx, and I will just duplicate this last one, and this route is gonna be the chat page, so /chat, and we're gonna show that chat page component, which we'll create in a second. But the thing is, or the catch is gonna be, if we have a user, then we want to show the chat page. Otherwise, we'll just say that it's gonna be navigate us to the authentication page. Okay, so it's gonna be /auth, and let's close this out. Okay, so let's create this chat page because it gives us import error. So I'll just say chat page.jsx RAFCE, and then here let's save this and save this also, import it, and then save it. So now let's go to here. When I click to that, it should take us to the chat page. We can see that from the URL as well. Now there is one problem here. It's because our entire application is wrapped with this container, which gives us 620 pixels wide container. But in our case, we want this chat page to be a little bit larger because we're gonna have conversations on the left and then rest of the messages on the right. So I want to make this 750 pixels wide, and my solution is going to be that I'll just wrap this with a box. Okay, this entire application is going to be contained with this box, and this box is going to be position of relative. And then, so let's just do this, and then I'll show you the other thing that we're going to change. So position is going to be relative, and we could just say width. Oops, so width is gonna be the entire screen. And now here inside the chat page, since this is inside that box, okay, we'll just say this is also gonna be a box, but the position is gonna be absolute. So we're gonna position this absolutely to the middle. So absolute from the left is gonna be 50%, and to take it to the center, we'll just say that transform translate x is gonna be -50 pixels. And that should, I mean 50%, not pixels, and this should be a box. So let's give this also width. So we'll just say that width is gonna be 750 pixels that we want this to be. So we could give a border to this. So let's say border 1 pixel solid red so that we can see it. Now here, as you can see, it is just wider than the entire application from the header, from the home page, and so we have this chat page in this screen, I mean in the middle. So after this box, we're just gonna have one flex, which is gonna be that actual flex that is holding the conversations, and then that message container on the right. So we will take it from the Chakra UI. So before we get into this flex, there is a couple of things that I want to add here. So this width, let's just cut this. Okay, I'll just delete this. It's going to be an object so that it's going to be responsive. So larger screens and above is going to be 750 pixels as we said before, but now in the middle screens and above is going to be 80%, and on the base, which is going to be the small phones or like smaller screens up until medium breakpoint, so we'll just say base is going to be 100%, and this is just going to make this on the large screens and above. Even if this screen is really wide, this chat page is only going to be 750 pixels wide, and on the smaller screens it's just going to be 100% of the container, and on the medium screens and above it's just going to be 80%. If you want to change these numbers, you can play around with it, but this is what I will go with. And now we can also give this a little bit of padding, and I think that's just going to be it for this box. Okay, I'll just say padding is going to be 4. We can delete this border. We don't need this. It was just to show you guys how wide it is. And now inside this flex, let's put our, so we're gonna have some props. Okay, this flex is gonna be gap of 4. Okay, but since, okay, so this is the container that we're gonna have the conversations on the left and the message container on the right. So let's just make them. So we'll just say on the left, this is gonna be conversations, and this is gonna be that message container. So now we're gonna give the gap of 4 between those, and we'll just say that flex direction should be responsive. Okay, on base and above is gonna be column on the smaller screens, and then the medium and above, okay, column, I cannot type, so medium and above is just gonna be row, so this is gonna be responsive that I showed in the demo. And the max width for this is gonna be on the smaller screens and above, smaller screens and above, it's gonna be 400 pixels, and on the medium and above it's just gonna be full or 100%. And you can also give MX auto so that it will take it to the middle on smaller screens. So let's work with these conversations. Now this conversation is gonna be the flex of 30, so it's gonna be 30% of the page, and flex of 70% for the message container. So let's save this and see if it is working or not. So we only see this message container, and let's, because we should say conversations. Okay, now here we see the conversations. It is only 30% of this container, and this is like the 70%. And here inside the conversations we'll have a text, and this text is coming from Chakra, and below this text we're gonna have a form so that we have that search box. And this form is not gonna have any actions, but it is going to have a flex, which inside is gonna be a input, which is coming from Chakra, so it could be closing, self-closing tag, and placeholder is gonna be, let's give the placeholder, we could say search for a user. And after this input we're gonna have a button, which is gonna be to hold that search icon. So we'll just say search icon from Chakra icons, and then this button, let's import this, and size is gonna be small for now. And this flex could have align items to the center, so we're gonna just center them in the y-axis. And also we could say gap is gonna be to this text is gonna have some props, so let's say font weight of 700, and then color, we'll just say that use color mode value, so that we have different colors on light and dark mode. So gray 600 for the light and gray 400 for the dark mode. We're just gonna say your conversations. So we also want to give some gap into this flex, so that it's gonna have a gap of 2 between each child. And then flex direction is gonna be column, and here let's take a look. Max width is just gonna be 250 pixels on the smaller screens, so let's just auto accept this, and then we'll change this. So on the medium it's gonna be full, but here it's gonna be 250 pixels. I think with this we could also add MX auto, and then we could just save this to see if this is working or not. And here, okay, so our conversations is on the left and this is on the right. This is the 70% of this entire container, and this is only the 30% of it. Now when we search for a conversation, we're gonna have a loading state for a second, maybe for a half second. So in that case we want to show some loading skeletons here, which now we would like to create it here after, I think after this form. We'll just say that now later we'll just say that if loading conversations, okay, this is going to be a state, and then we will just render this portion. But now let's just say that if it is true, so that it will always render this side, and we can see that in the screen. Now we could just we want to show 5 skeletons. So one way of doing this is gonna be, you would just create 5 items inside an array, and then you would just map this, and you would just take this each item, okay, with the index, and then, or maybe you shouldn't take the index if you don't need, and then here we'll just kind of render something for 5 times. Okay, I'll just say flex, and okay, so that should be like this, and close this as well. So we're getting this index so that we can give it a key. Okay, we'll say key is gonna be this index, and this flex is gonna have gap of 4, and then align items is gonna be center, right? And I think padding of 1, and then border radius of medium. So this is gonna be the flex that is gonna hold on the left for an avatar skeleton, and on the right is just gonna take 2 skeletons, like kind of name and then the message. So let's just complete this, and then you're gonna see what we are doing. So inside the box we'll just have a skeleton, okay, skeleton circle, which is coming from chakra. Okay, this is gonna be, so you can just see this from the documentation, but I already did, so I'll just add this, import it, and size is gonna be 10. And after this box we'll just have a flex, width of full, and then flex direction is gonna be column, so that okay, it's gonna be like vertically aligned, I mean on top of each other, and then gap is gonna be 3. And this flex is gonna have 2 skeleton. We need to also import this, so this could be self-close tag, and one of them, okay, for the height we'll just say that 10 pixels, and width is gonna be 80 pixels, so this is gonna be for the name, and then we'll say just height is gonna be 8 pixels, yeah, and then width is just gonna be 90%. So now let's just save this and hopefully see if this works. Okay, as we can see, we are getting 5 items, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because we're just doing map of 5. And then on the left, we see this skeleton circle, and then 1 skeleton on top and 1 skeleton at the bottom. So this is like kind of 10 pixels height and 80 pixels width. And this is like 8 pixels height, and I think it was 90% width. Now let's actually build these each conversations after we load them, right? So this is gonna be false once that conversations has been loaded, right? So we'll also say that so we'll, at the end we'll basically say that if loading conversations is false, right? If loading conversations is false, then just we'll just map the conversations here, but in our case let's just create them as a component. So I will delete here, and we're gonna change this later, but since we're doing the UI now, it's gonna be fine. So I'll say conversation, and here we need to import this. So let's create a component for this. I will say flex, okay, not flex, using too much chakra. So conversation.jsx is gonna be our component. Now we're gonna have RAFCE to get the boilerplate, RAFCE, and then here this is going to be a flex from the chakra, and then it's gonna have the gap of 4 for the spacing, align items, I think align items is gonna be center, and then padding of 1, and on the hover state we're gonna change something. So let's get this like this. Cursor is gonna be pointer, and on the background property we're just gonna see that use color mode value. Okay, it's gonna be gray 100 of 600, okay, for the light mode, and gray of dark on the dark mode, and color should be white. So let's say color is gonna be white in the both cases, and we should have a comma here. Now lastly we'll just say that border radius of, okay, not the border but border radius of medium. Now for each conversation, we want to have a profile picture and then the username on the right hand side as well as the message. So inside this flex, we'll just say that we want to have a wrap item. So this is, you're gonna see why we're doing this. So we'll say wrap item, and then inside this wrap, we're gonna have avatar, and so this size is going to be responsive. Actually, let's just take it like this for now. And for the source, let's say we're going to get this eventually from the database, but now let's just say https, and then we'll just say bit dot, so it's going to be bit.ly and slash broken link, so that we can get that empty user avatar. And now for the size, I want to change this. Okay, it's going to be an object. For the small screens and above, or actually for the base and above, we're just going to have x small size. And for the small screens, it's going to be small, and medium and above, medium and above is just going to be medium size. And then here inside this wrap item, after the avatar, we would like to show a online status. Here we'll just say avatar badge. Okay, avatar badge. This is coming from documentation if you want to check. So box size, we could say 1 em and green of 500. And now let's save this. But after this, so after this wrap item, now we put the avatar, okay, on the left. Now we want to put the message and the username on the right. So we'll just import a stack for this, and we will say that this stack is going to be direction of column. So we could use flex for this also, but it's just nice to use it. And maybe we could say font size of small, and then this is going to have a text. So let's say text, import it, and this is gonna be font weight of 700. I think we didn't import this properly, so okay, now we just import this, and we could say that this is going to be display flex because we want to have the username on the left and then that verified badge on the, okay, the verified badge on the right and username on the left. So display is going to be flex, and then we could just say that align items to be center, and inside this text we're just gonna have the username. Let's say John. Okay, it should be like this, and then we're just gonna have a image from Chakra, and source is gonna be inside the public folder, and then verified.png. So we use this in the last part also. And now just gonna have a width of 4, height of 4, and then margin left of 1. After this text, so it's gonna be our last text, we're just gonna be holding that message. So I think we could say that, okay, inside this text, maybe just say font size of x small, and then display. After this, here I just say display flex, and you're gonna see why we're using this flex later once we actually fetch the data. So we'll say align items is also gonna be center, and then this gap is gonna be 1. So here let's say hello some message, and then we could just put some dot. Now let's save this, and now we need to import this conversation. So I will import this and duplicate it a couple of times. So import the, so is it conversations? So I think that should be just conversation. Okay, I'll just change the name. Okay, I just changed the name to conversation. Now I will also make it this conversation, save this, and then here I'll just say that delete this conversation and import it. And I think we have in this import, which is not correct. Let's just delete this also, and let's just make it like 3 times and take a look. Okay, we have some problems. Let's take a look at from the console. Okay, it's about like this wrap. So let's take a look. It's wrap item, but didn't we import it? We have this wrap item, why are we getting this color? Did we use this? Okay, this is not a color. So we should have a wrap item, and then we will have the avatar and then avatar badge, and this avatar badge should be inside the avatar. That's why we're getting that error. So this avatar is not going to be self-closed, but here we should close this. So it's going to be slash avatar, and now that should be working fine. So here we can see our messages, right? And once we have this loading state has been completed, this will just disappear, and we're only gonna see each conversation. So we're only gonna see the conversations, but not the loading state. Now, if we just make this false inside the chat page, so that was true. Now, if it is false, it's not gonna render this right side, and we'll just see this chat messages. Now, if we don't select any of these conversations, on the right hand side, we should have something like that says select the conversation to start messaging. So now let's build this. So it's gonna be after this flags. Okay, so after this flags, I'm sorry. Here we'll just say that we're gonna have a flags, and this flags is gonna be again 70%. So it's just gonna be same as this message container, but we will just we'll just show them conditionally. So we'll just say that flex of 70, and then border radius is gonna be, let's say, medium, and after that we'll just have padding of 2, and flex direction we're just gonna have as column, and below that we said that align items is gonna be center, justify content is gonna be center as well, and height is gonna be only 400 pixels. So let's say 400 pixels, and inside this flags we'll just have an icon. So we're just gonna have this icon, which is GI conversation, and then size is gonna be 100. So let's just import this GI conversation. Here maybe it doesn't give us any suggestions, so let's take it from the copilot. Okay, we get this conversation, and after this icon, here we're gonna have a text. So text, and this is just gonna say that select a conversation to, okay, I'm just spelling everything wrong, so select a conversation to start messaging. And this font size could be maybe 20. So let's say font size is gonna be 20. Now let's save, and hopefully it's just gonna be here. Let's see. Okay, so maybe we should comment this out for a second, because we're not gonna see both of them on the same time. Okay, now once we click to this, it's just gonna change that. It's gonna change it with the message container, but for now, at least we have this kind of like, so at least we just built the UI for this. Now it is time to create this message container, where it was that container, we had some kind of like container at this size, and we had messages from top to bottom. So for this, we're gonna go inside the components. We'll just say that we need to create a new component. It's gonna be in message container.jsx, and we'll just get it with the boilerplate. And then here we will, instead of this, I'll just delete this, and I'll say that this is gonna be message container, and we will import this from the components it's coming. So I just saved this file by importing this message container. So inside the message container, we're gonna have a flags, which is gonna be that flags of 70, so 70%. Here let's import the flags to get autocompletes, and then this flags, since it's like since it's our container, we should just give it some background color to make that look a little bit better. So we'll just say that use color mode value, and for the light mode is gonna be gray 200, and for the dark mode is gonna be gray dark, and this should be 200. And after this bg property, we should we should give the border radius as medium, and then we'll just say that flex direction should be column. So first we're just gonna have the message header. Okay, so I'll just maybe put some comments. I'll just say message header, and then after here we'll just say that we're gonna have a flex, which is gonna be the width of full and height of 12 units, which is the unit of chakra, and align items is gonna be the center and gap of 2. And this flex is gonna have one avatar and one text, which is gonna be the username. So I'll just say that we have not flex, but to be honest, we'll just have a avatar. And now for the source, since we don't have any users, maybe we could just put an empty string. I hope it is gonna give us that blank user profile picture. And then this is gonna be size of small, as well as, okay, this is gonna be it. And then after this avatar, we're just gonna have a text, which is gonna put the username. So we'll just say John Doe, and then we should have that image from chakra that is going to be verified, and width of 4, height of 4, margin left 1. Since these are like side by side, we should just say display, okay, this text, let's import this. So display flex, and align items is going to be center, so that they are just vertically centered. After this flex, after the message header, we'll just have a divider. So let's put the divider and save, and to see how that works. So we imported this already. Okay, so we need to remove this placeholder. Here we have this message container, but we should give some maybe padding to here. I think I skipped that, but let's take a look. In the message container, we'll just say that padding is gonna be, say, 1, and now it looks a little bit better. But let's say padding 2 is going to be, I think, a better option. And after this divider, this is going to be where we have the messages. Okay, so I will say that here we're going to have a flex, and this flex is going to be the direction column. So flexor is going to be the column, and then we're going to have the gap of 4, and then margin y of 4 as well. And this is gonna be height of 400 pixels. Okay, but now the thing is, we should say that overflow y is gonna be scroll. So I will show that once we get there, but just imagine in this container we have a lot of messages. So if we just exceed that, okay, we should have a scroll into this, or otherwise it's just gonna overflow out of this container. So that we say that when it's in the overflow situation, just make that just put that scroll bar so that we can scroll. But I will just explain that once we get there also. And here let's put some skeletons in the loading state again. So we'll say that eventually we'll say that if it is loading messages, we will show this right hand side. But in our case, we don't have any state because we're building the design part. So let's just say that true, so that we can see this right hand side. So again, maybe we could say like array of 4. So you could either put like 5 items that I showed previously, or you could just say that this structure an array of 5 items. So it's exactly the same thing. So we'll just say map it, get the index and the item itself. So I think let's just check if these are the corrects. So we need to add another this parentheses, and then here we'll just say that we should have a flex. Okay, it's kind of annoying, but it doesn't work as expected sometimes. So it's gonna have a key of this index, and then it's gonna have a gap of 2. I'm sorry, that should be inside the flex. We'll just say that gap of 2, and then here align items to be center. So gap of 2, align items center, and then we're gonna have the padding as 1. Also the border radius is gonna be medium, and also we're gonna have another property which is gonna be the align self, and it's gonna be kind of like dynamic depending on the index. So we'll just say that if I is divisible by, or if I is divisible by 2, we're just gonna have that flex start, but otherwise it's gonna be flex end. So it kind of looks strange, but in the first iteration I is gonna be 0, so this condition is gonna be true, so that we're just gonna have this align self as flex start. And in the next iteration I is gonna be 1, so this condition is gonna be false, and then this align self is gonna be flex end, and in the next iteration it's gonna be I is gonna be 2, and then this will gonna be true, and we'll just take the flex start, so on and so forth. So it's kind of like alternating in this align self. Once it's just gonna be on the left hand side, and in the next iteration it's gonna be on the right hand side. And once we complete this, once we save this file, you're gonna see what we are doing. And then here, if we are, it is in the inside the flex. So if the I is divisible by 2, we're just gonna put our avatar first, and then we're gonna put our message skeleton. So we could just say that if it is divisible by 2, we will just put this skeleton circle, and this size we could say is gonna be 7. And then so after this we'll just have a flex, should be like this flex, and then this flex is gonna have the flex direction as column, and then gap of 2. And inside this we're just gonna have a skeleton, so it's gonna be self close tag, and it's just gonna be like this. So we'll just say that height is gonna be 8 pixels, so let's say 8 pixels, and then the width is gonna be, I think, just 250 pixels. So we could delete these two and duplicate these ones, and then I will import this from Chakra. And below this flex, now if it is in the next iteration, so if I is not divisible by 2, after this we're gonna put this skeleton circle. Now let's just save this. The most kind of looking really insanely complex, but let's just save this, and it's just gonna be, we're gonna understand that. So here, this is basically what we're doing. So we have 5 items, 1 2 3 4 5, and in each iteration the index is going to be 0 for this, 1 2 3 and 4. If I is divisible by 2, we say that this is align items is going to be flex start, which is just put it on the left, and in the next iteration it's going to be flex end. So I am talking about this line, okay, align self, flex start or flex end. And here, since it is 1 is not divisible by 2, we put this on the flex end. And then so we add another check. If we have so if divisible by 2, we first put the skeleton circle and then the message. But if it is not divisible by 2, we first put the message and then the circle. I hope now it makes sense. And we kind of have this overflow thing. It's because we added overflow y on scroll, and it's gonna be fine once we just fetch that messages. Okay, after this loading state, now this is gonna be false once we fetch that. Okay, so let's just say that false so that we don't see that. And after this, once we fetch the messages, we'll just say that messages.map, and for each message we will return something, right, which is gonna be our message component. And this message component will take some props, but for now we'll just skip that. We will add that once we get there. Okay, so I will just delete it here, and I will just say message and import this. But first we need to create this component. So inside the components, I will just say that message.jsx. So with the boilerplate we get it. So this is kind of gonna be the same, where we're just gonna put it on the align self to the flex end or flex start. So let's say this is gonna take a prop which says maybe self message or own message. So if we own this message, we're gonna show this in a different order. So we will say that this is gonna be a flex, okay, and here we'll say gap of, okay, I'm just putting that in the wrong place, so it's gonna be here. So a gap of 2, and then we'll just say that align self. For now, let's just say that flex int, and it's because let's make this a fragment, put it here, and then let's say if it is own message, if we are the one that's sending this message, we will render this flex, and in the else case we will render another thing. So here I will put this like this. Okay, if you are the owner of this message, we're going to show this flex, and this flex is going to have a text as well as an avatar. So inside the text we'll just have the max width, but before that let's add this text, import it I mean, and this text is going to have the max width of 350 pixels and background of blue 400, as well as padding of 1. Padding is gonna be 1, and border radius could be medium. And this text, let's say lorem maybe 200. Maybe it's just a little bit too much. Maybe let's say lorem 50. And then after this text, I don't think that, okay, I was gonna say I don't think that if you have anything else, but we'll just have an avatar. So I'll just say avatar, source could be empty, size could be small. Actually let's change the size. We're gonna have the width as 7, so width is gonna be 7. This height also gonna be 7. And did we import the avatar? So we didn't. Let's import this. And yeah, basically we're just gonna copy this flex from here and paste it, but there is two things that we're gonna change. So we'll just remove this align self, and then we'll take this avatar before this text, and let's just save this now. And okay, so we're just saying that if this is the own message, if you are the owner of this message, we're just gonna put this flex in the align self of flex int, and we will put the avatar after the text. And if this message is coming from the other user that we're chatting with, the avatar is gonna be on the left, and then we're gonna have the text on the right. So here we're gonna put this own message. Let's first import this component, and we'll just say that own message, let's say true for this, and for this let's say false, and another false, and another true. Let's say I will save this one, and let's take a look now. Okay, maybe this is a little bit too large for the message, right? We could shrink it so it works nice, but let's just make it a little bit smaller so that we can just see that. Okay, so we got the message. Since we are the owner of this message, it is on the right hand side, and if the other user sends this message, it's going to be on the left. That's why we're using this own message property that is coming from props. And this is just a little bit too much. If we just shrink this like this, and it's just gonna look better. And one more thing that I forgot to change is gonna be the background. So if you are not the owner of the message, so maybe this should be gray 400, right? So that it's just a better user experience. So as we can see, it just looks, so we just know that this is the message that we sent, and this is the user sending to us. Since the background is gray, we could also say that the color is gonna be dark or black. So color, let's say, is gonna be black. Maybe it's just gonna look a little bit better than this. Okay, now we shouldn't be seeing this overflow bar if we are not overflowing this. Okay, I don't know why we're getting this, but so we said that height is gonna be 400 pixels. Maybe we could just say max height. I don't think if this is gonna change this, but okay, it doesn't work. Why is this? Okay, maybe we should say that overflow y is gonna be auto. Once we hit that overflow, then we're gonna see that. So let's put some more messages like this, and it's gonna overflow. Okay, so that should be not scroll but auto, and in the auto case, if it is not overflowing, it's not gonna show this overflow bar or the scroll bar, and if it is overflowing, then we're gonna see this scroll bar. And also it's kind of like next to each other. Okay, what I want to do is I just want to change this scroll bar, And for this, we're gonna go inside our style sheet. It's gonna be index.css, and here I will just say that WebKit. So this is how we change the scroll bar. So WebKit scroll bar is gonna be width of 7 pixels, and then we'll just again have this WebKit scroll bar track. So let's say track. The background color is gonna be 1E 3 times. Okay, we already used this color. And then WebKit scroll bar thumb, we're gonna have so the background color for this could be 3 times 8. And then once we hover over this, we want to change the color. So for this, you could use maybe 555, or you could just change those colors as you wish. So now if we save this, it's just gonna look a little bit better than previously. So also let's just give a little bit padding to this. We have this message container. So here, this message container maybe should have the padding of 2 on the x-axis, let's say, and let's save. Okay, now it just looks a little bit better than previously. Or let's just say it's gonna be like padding general on 4 directions, and so that we can get even some paddings at the bottom. And now eventually we're gonna have another thing here is gonna be that message input. So we can type it and then we can send our message. So for this, I think we're gonna go inside the message container, and after all these flexes, okay, just before the last one, we will just say that message input, which is going to be our component for the message input. So let's create this component, message input.jsx. Let's get this, save this, and then we're going to import this guy. So I will save it here, and this input message is going to be, this component is going to be relatively basic. So we'll just say it's going to be a form, and we can delete the content. Now we're going to have a input group again from the chakra. So let's say input group, and inside this input group, we're just going to have a input from chakra, and then this input will have, that should be self-closing. So this is gonna be width of full. So placeholder, as always, inside an input is just gonna be type a message, and we're gonna give on change in value again once we get to the functionalities. And after this input, we're using input group so that we can give input right element, which is gonna be an icon. So we'll just say that input right element. Okay, let's import this. It's not gonna be self-closed. Import this, and then it's gonna be just like this so that we can put our icon into this. So it's gonna be IO, okay, IO send sharp, which is gonna be coming from, I think, React icons. So we'll just say that color, so let's say green 500, and import the icon here. So import, I think that should be working fine now. Okay, so now it just works fine, and it's not green. I don't know why, but I think this looks better than that. So we could just remove this color. It's just better if we just have it as white. With this, now we have completed the entire UI. If there's anything that you didn't understand, maybe you could just ask it in the Discord, or maybe just take a look at the documentation, because here we're not doing anything else other than HTML and CSS, but we are using the Chakra UI. So yeah, we even add the skeletons, and now I think it is time to go back to the functionalities. And here, let's remove this imports that we're not using. In our case, we're going to use this one, but in the message container, maybe we could just remove this React import. And inside the chat page, inside the message, we're going to remove this import as well. Yeah, with this now, this UI design part should be completed now. So now that we have completed our UI design, it is time for us to just think about the database. Okay, so how are we going to store these messages that we're going to get from the users? What kind of schema should we have, and that kind of stuff. For this, I just prepared some drawing that I have here. So basically, we're going to have 2 collections. One is gonna be for the conversations and one for the messages. So here we're gonna store all of the messages that we have in the entire application, and we're also gonna have these conversations, and each conversation is gonna be between two users. Now a conversation will have an ID and it's gonna have the participants. It's gonna be two ID. Okay, so let's say ID1 and ID2, and let's say this is gonna be John and Jane, and we're gonna just store their IDs. And then we also have this last message, and you're gonna see why we're using this. I will explain that, but just for now, know that we're gonna have a last message for each conversation, and it's gonna have two fields: the message itself, which is inside this text, and it's gonna be this sender, which is gonna be like ID of the user who sent this last message. And for each message, we're gonna have the message content itself, which is gonna be this text, and we're gonna have the sender who sent this. It's gonna be ID again, and also we'll have this conversation ID, and it's just gonna indicate that which conversation does this message is belongs to. So I have an example here. So let's come to here. Let's say we have two users, John and Jane, and ID of John is 1, ID of Jane is 2. If John sends a message to Jane that says, "Hi Jane," first we're going to create a conversation. Let's say in our case, the ID of the conversation is 1, 2, 3, and the participants is going to be ID of these users. So 1 and 2, right, which is the ID of these users. And then the last message we have inside this conversation, which is coming from sender of 1, who is John, and the text, the message that says, "Hi Jane." And then now we have the conversation, and also we'll create a message. So the conversation ID is 1, 2, 3, which means that this message belongs to this conversation, which is between ID of 1 and 2 and John and Jane. Okay, so who sent this message is the ID of 1, so it is John, and the message, what that is, it says, "Hi Jane." So this is basically our schema. This is how are we gonna store our data in the database. Let's just quickly reiterate. We're gonna have two collections, one for conversations, one for messages, and each conversation will have the ID, and then it's gonna have the participants, like who is in this conversation, right? It's always gonna be 2 because we're just building a private chat application. And also we're gonna have this last message field, which I said that I will explain that once we get there. And then we'll have this messages collection, and then each message will have a conversation ID that will indicate that this message belongs to this conversation, and we're gonna put the ID, and then it's gonna have the sender who sent this message, and also the text, which is gonna be the message itself. Now with these in mind, now we can actually build our models. So for that, we'll just go inside here, VS Code, and I think we got an update, so that's why UI is a little bit different. Okay, I will just shrink this, and inside the backend we're gonna have models. So let's say the message, so message model.js. So as always, we're gonna use the mongoose. So let's say import mongoose from mongoose library, and then here we'll just say const message schema, and it's gonna be a new mongoose schema. And then this is gonna take an object, if we remember correctly, and then we're gonna take another object that is gonna take the timestamps, which will add the created at and updated at fields. So here is gonna be our schema. So we said that it's gonna have a conversation ID, so which is gonna be the type of an ID. So we'll just say that type mongoose dot schema dot types dot object ID, and we already have an autocomplete, so I will accept this, and the reference is gonna be to the conversation model. So we could just accept all these lines, and then we also said that each message will have the sender, which is also going to be an ID, and it's going to be a reference to the user document. And then we will just have the text, which is going to be the message itself, and it's going to be type of string. So let's just auto accept this also. And at the bottom, now we have created our schema, so we'll just have a model. So we'll say const message, and it's going to be mongoose.model and message, and then we'll just pass the message schema, and eventually we'll just export default this message. Okay, now this is completed. So let's come here and create another model, which is going to be the conversation. So conversation model.js. And now again, we'll need mongoose. So let's say const conversation. So let's say conversation schema, and it's going to be new mongoose schema. So let's import this mongoose. And then this is going to take two objects. First one is going to be our schema, and then for 1D timestamps to say true to get that fields. And then here we said that we're going to have participants, which is going to be an array. So we'll just say that participants, and it's going to be array, and each object in this array is going to be an ID, and that will take us to the reference to the user model. And then we'll just have the last message. We'll say last message, and we'll say this is an object which is gonna have the text of string. Okay, so we're getting an error because we need to just put a comma up here, and then here this text is gonna be type of string, and then we'll have the sender, which is again gonna be an object, and it's gonna be reference to the user model, and eventually we'll just have the so I think that was it. Yeah, okay, we'll just save this. And then at the bottom, we will create our model. So const conversation, get the mongoose.model, pass the name of the collection, which is going to be like conversation, or the name of the model, which will eventually be our collection, and then pass the conversation schema. So at the bottom, we'll just export default this conversation. So I'll just save this as it is, and then we'll go inside the server.js, and we need to create our message routes. So I will duplicate this one, and I'll just say that API/messages, and we will get what? We'll get a message routes, right? So here, let's say message routes, which is gonna be coming from the routes folder, and let's take it to here, and let's just change this. Just gonna be message routes, which we'll create in a second. And inside the routes folder, let's go there, it should be here, and we'll just say that message routes.js. And now here we will just get the like kind of the boilerplate. So let's say const router, it's going to be coming from express.router, and that R should be uppercase, and we need to import express first. So let's say import express from express, and then we'll just say export default is router. So export default router, and if you remember here we could have our methods. So let's say HTTP methods, router dot, let's say get, or let's say just post. When we posted here, well, let's say call a function that is gonna say message route. Okay, and then we could just save this. Now we'll change this. This is just a boilerplate, but now okay, we imported this message routes here. That should be working fine. I will just save it here, and then inside the controllers we should have message controller, which will create our functions. So I'll just put message controller.js, and then inside the message routes, maybe we could, it's time to change this. So we'll maybe, what should we say, send message, and this should be a protected route, because if we don't have a user, if we are not logged in, if we are not authenticated, then we just can't send a message. So let's say protected route, which was a middleware that we have created in the last part. And let's get this send message function, which we'll create here. So let's say async function send message, which is gonna take the request and response, and it's gonna be a function. And eventually we'll just say that export is gonna be an object, and just send message function. Now I'll just save this file here, and then inside we'll just import this send message function. And now it is time to just add the functionality or the logic into this function, right? Now for the function body, we'll just have a try catch as always, and we'll just say that res.status of 500 for the error case, and we'll just send the error, and that should be maybe just error. And then inside the try, now we want to send this message to a receiver, right? Okay, we'll just have a recipient ID, and that should be coming from the front end or the client. So we will get that from the requested body, and then we also need the message that is coming from client. So let's say const, and I will just destructure this. I will take the recipient ID, and we will also take the message, and it's coming from requested body, as I said before. And now since we are the sender, we'll just say const sender ID is going to be request dot user dot underscore ID. So we got the sender and the recipient IDs. Now we'll just need to create a conversation, but first we need to check if this conversation is already exists. So when you send the first message, you don't have any conversation between you and then the recipient, right? So if this is the case, if you are just sending the first message, we need to create a conversation. But if you are just sending the second or third message, then you already have a conversation. You are just adding more and more messages into that conversation. So for this, I'll just say let conversation, and I'm using let because we're gonna reassign this. I will just say await conversation dot find one, and then so it's not members, so I'll just accept this, but we'll just change this. So it's gonna be the participants as far as I remember correctly, right? And then so we go inside the conversation model. Okay, let's import this. So what we did here was to go inside the conversation model collection. We're gonna find one conversation that is between us and this recipient. Okay, we put the sender ID and recipient, and we put this all so that it's just gonna get us this exact conversation that has these IDs. And then we'll just say if this conversation does not exist, so if not conversation, and what are we going to do? We'll actually create a new one. So I will just say that conversation is going to be equal to new conversation, and then it's just going to take an object. And if you remember, each conversation had participants and last message fields. So here I'll go down below, and then we'll just say participants is going to be sender ID and recipient ID. And also we will have, so we'll just have a last message, which is going to be an object, and it's going to have the text, which is the message, and also the sender. It's going to be the ID of the sender, right? We'll just sender ID. And then once we create this conversation, we need to save it into database. So I'll just say await conversation.save. But now if we have a conversation, we just need to create the message, right? So const new message, we're gonna say, and we'll call our message model. I'll import this, and then it's gonna be an object. And what a message had, do you remember? It was the conversation ID, sender ID, and then the text. So I will just scroll down a little bit. So it's going to be the conversation ID, which is going to be the ID of the conversation that we just created up here. And then sender is going to be the sender ID, which is going to be, in our case, us, or, you know, that sender. And then the text is going to be the message that is coming from the client. And once we have the message, now we are going to do two things. And the first one is going to be, we will save this message to database, and then also we will update that last message field to this new message. And I know that kind of like looks strange, but I think we'll just understand that in a second. So I will say promise.all so that it's just faster and happening concurrently. And it's going to be an array. So we'll just say that new message.save, and also conversation.update1. Okay, so I should just auto accept this. I will just say that conversation is going to be like this. This is going to be the variable, and update1, and we will get that last message fields, and we're going to have the text as well as the sender. So wait a second, why do we even need this last message in the conversation? So let's just take a look. So inside the conversation, we had this last message field, but I didn't say why. So when we fetch our conversations, if you see here that we are just fetching the latest message. So here the John says, hello, some message, right? So when we fetch all of our conversations, it is just really convenient if we have that field inside the conversation. That's why I have added this into the conversations model. And now when we send a message, we are not only saving this message into the database, but we're also updating that latest message inside that conversation. So now what's going to happen when you just come here at the end of this tutorial, let's say at the end of once this application is completed. So let's say you send something here, and once you press enter, you'll get that message here, and then it should also update here with that latest message. So I hope I explained that in a clear way, and I'm just assuming that we're good. So once we have saved the message into database and updated that like conversation, and now it is time to just send this message to the client with res.status of 201, which means that it is being created. So status of 201, and then we'll just say that JSON, and not okay, JSON, and then we'll just send the new message. So now I will just save this and let's test it out in Postman. So before we get into Postman, just know that in our database, we don't have any messages or any conversations. So we'll just create them now. And I will open up the Postman. Now I am in the Postman, and these are our last endpoints that we added in that previous video. Now I will just create a new collection, which is going to be the messages. Okay, I'll just rename this. I'll say messages and save it. And then here I will add a new request. So let's come here, add a new request, and then this is going to be post, which is going to be to HTTP localhost 5000. It's going to be API messages, and just that's it. So I'll just delete this part, and that should be messages. And inside the body, we'll send some raw JSON data. So it had the recipient ID as well as the message. If we remember, let's just take a look. From the client, we're accepting this recipient ID as well as the message. So here, okay, wrong place. So inside the Postman, we're gonna take this recipient ID, and that should be a string. We're gonna put an ID here, but first let's just log in so that we can send some messages. So I will log in as Jane. I will send this. Now that we logged in, I'm not sure. Let's send this again. I don't know why we're not getting any response. Okay, so we have some problems. Let's take a look at in the console. So here inside the terminal, so cannot find module. So it says that protect route. Okay, I know what the problem is. So here, let's just close this. So it was inside the message routes. So that should be protect route.js because we're using the type of module in the package JSON. So we should put this .js at the end, and let's check if we have any kind of this in the here as well. So .js, and then here we'll just put the .js, and I think that should be it. Now let's try to log in again. I will send this as Jane Doe. Okay, so now we're logged in, we have cookies, and I will get the ID of the John. We're gonna send a message to John, so the recipient ID is gonna be the ID of the John. Okay, I'll copy this inside this new request. Maybe we should say that send message, and I'll just save this, so it's gonna update here as well. So now the recipient ID is gonna be ID of the John, and let's say for the text we could say wait, was it text or message? I think it was message. And then we'll just say that, hey John, and maybe exclamation points. Now if I just save this and send this request, we got an error. So let's check. It says cannot post to API messages, and it is post. So let's take a look. Inside the server, we set that API/messages. It should be here. Now let's save this and try to do this again inside the Postman. Now we'll just send this again, and we got the message as we can see here. Now let's just take a look at our DB. I'll just refresh this page, and hopefully you will get that conversations and messages here. Okay, now we have messages. Let's take a look. We should have one message. It is send it by this ID, which is the ID of Jane, I believe, and then text, which is hi John, and this message is belongs to this conversation, which has this ID, which ends with BAE. So let's take a look at this conversation. Okay, we have a conversation that ends with BAE, and the participants, the ID of John and Jane, and the last message is sent it by Jane, and also it has the text of hi John. So now it's just working pretty fine. Now we need to add our the other handler for our new endpoint. So this endpoint is gonna be when we want to get all messages between two users. So we're gonna go inside the, I think, let's take a look, message routes, right? Here this is gonna be a get request, because we want to get the messages. So here, what do we need to pass? So it's gonna be the ID of the other user, right? The conversation is between me and the other user, so I need to send somehow the ID of the other user. So here I'll just accept this other user ID, and then this is also going to be a protected route, and we'll just say that get messages, and we will create this function inside the message controller. So let's create this at the end, the bottom. So I'll just say async function get messages, and it's going to be taking the request as well as response. And yeah, now let's just export this get messages. I'll save this file, and then here we'll just control space, get the get message function, and now let's create this function. Now in the body of this function, we will have a try catch. So in the catch, we'll just have res.status of 500. So this is kind of classic, and we'll just put the error message. And in the try, actually even before the try, now we need to get the ID of the other user, right? I'll just say const and destructure this other user ID from request.params. And let's get the ID of the current user, which is inside that request object. So I'll just call this as const user ID, and it's going to be request.user._ID. And now in the try, first we need to find this conversation between these two users. So I'll say const conversation, and it's going to be await in the conversation model, call defined one method, put an object, and we will just use that participants all method that we used above. So participants, and we're going to have an object that says all, and just put the user ID and other user ID into this array. So now that we got the conversation, we will just find all of the messages that contains this conversation ID. So I'll say const messages, and we'll just say await message. Okay, so that should be await message model find, and it's just gonna find all of them, right? And where the conversation ID, so I'll say conversation ID is equal to this conversation that we found, the ID of it. And then, so since we got all the messages, let's just sort this depending on that created at. So I'll say sort, and let's say created at, and if we put -1, it's gonna be in descending order. I think, yeah, so that we're gonna just get the oldest message at the top and newest message at the bottom. With this, I think we just can res that status of 200 with this message field, or this array that we just fetched. And to make this code a little bit better, and I think we have, so did we spell something wrong? Conversation. Okay, that should be like this. I'll copy this and then change it here as well. And now, as I said, just to make this a little bit better, we could say if this conversation is not found, maybe we could just return 404. So if this is the case, if we don't have any conversations, or I mean, if you don't have this conversation, we'll just say return res status of 404, right? With the message that says conversation not found. So I will just save this and then go inside the Postman. So let's add another request. It's going to be get. Okay, so here localhost API messages, and we're going to put the ID of the other user. But first, let's just rename this. It's going to be like get messages. I will save this. Now, let's say, so since we are logged in as Jane, I will get the ID of the John, which is this. So we will say that get the messages between the Jane and John. So I'll pass the ID of the John, and if we just send this request, okay, we have a problem. API messages. Let's take a look. We were accepting as an ID, right? Other user ID. So message routes. So other user ID. Okay. Why this is not working? Okay, so this is a post method, so that should be get. Here, if you just now save this and let's test it out, it's gonna work, I believe. And there we go. Now we got an array of objects. In this case, we only have one message that says hi John, and let's send another message from Jane. Hi John, let's say please answer to my messages. I'll just save this and send. Okay, this looks like has been added to DB, and if we just send this again, now we got two messages. And now that, so like now the newest one is at the top and the latest one at the bottom, but I think we don't want this to be in this case, right? We just want them to be in reverse order, because like when we display that in the screen, we will just have the first first item at the top, which should be this. Let's take a look. I think I maybe misspelled something. Created at -1, so let's just change this to 1. Maybe I am doing something wrong here. If we just send this like this, okay, so we got the oldest message at the top and then newest message at the bottom. I believe that this is now, in this case, we are doing the correct by adding this created at with 1, not -1. But if this is wrong, I will just let you know once we get that in the client part. Okay, so this function is also done. Now we need to have one more last function, which is going to be to get all the conversations for a user. So for this, we need to create another route inside the message routes, and this is also going to be a get route. And I'll just put the get routes to the top, and then, okay, I think we did something wrong. Okay, so now we're gonna have a conversations at the top. So here, I'll say conversations, and this is gonna get all of the conversations that we have. So let's say get conversations, and now that should be working fine. We'll just create this function and then export it here. Import this. So I'll just put it here, and let's go inside the message controller. We'll have this new function, async function, paste this, and then request response, and at the end just export this function. So let's put it like this. And okay, we can save this file here and then save this here as well. And as we said, like all of these functions should be protected, because if you are not authenticated, you cannot just send a message. You cannot see messages between two users, and you cannot get all conversations between two users as well. So as far as this get conversations function, let's fill the body. Here we'll get a try catch. In the error, in the catch, we'll just say our classic message. Okay, I'll just go here, and then before the try, let's get the ID of our current user. So I'll say const user ID from request dot user dot underscore ID. So now the way to fetch all the conversations, we're gonna go inside the conversation model. So const conversations. So conversations and await. So we'll just say that conversation dot find. And now here, what is going to happen is that we'll just say that find all of the conversations for us that includes this user ID inside that participants array. And in our case, we just pass this user ID, so it's gonna find all conversations that we have. And now the thing is, we don't only want to get the conversation, because in the conversation, we only have the last message and participants field. We also want to get the user profile picture and the username. So if you realize that all of these are a conversation, and this conversation also needs to have the user profile picture as well as the username. So for that, we could send another fetch request, but hopefully in Mongoose, there is a method called populate, and it's gonna help us in this case. So here I will say that dot populate, and this is gonna take an object with two fields in our case. So the path, which is gonna be like which field this is gonna looking into, and it's gonna be the participants because it is an ID that reference to the user model. And now we'll just going to select the fields that we want is gonna be the username as well as the profile picture. So I'll say username and profile pic because this is how we stored in the user model. So I can feel like this populate might be a little bit strange if you're seeing this for the first time, but it's really useful. And all it does is that, so we've fetched a conversation, and inside this conversation, we had something called participants field. And each participant is an type of object ID that reference to the user model. So if you just put this populate and the path is participants, and this participants is a reference to the user model, and we can now just select the username, profile picture, or email, whatever we want inside this select. It's gonna select all of them for us. Now let's just return this, so res.status and just JSON of these conversations. Now if we save this, and hopefully you're gonna see in the postman, let's add another request. So here it should be an add request. So we'll just say that get conversations, and you could save this. And also we're just gonna say get our endpoint messages slash conversations. Since we are logged in as Jane, it's gonna fetch all of the conversations that the Jane has, and in this case we only have one conversation with John. So let's send this. Okay, we have a problem, I mean. So conversations. Oh, okay, so I think the name was incorrect, so I'll just change this. Okay, so that should be conversations. Now I'll just save this, and here, as you can see, now we're getting the conversation which has the last message, the ID of the conversation. And for the participants, now we should normally only have this ID field, but we are also getting the username and profile picture because we added that populate method, and it is like super useful in this case. So now we are done with the backend, at least for our handlers in this message routes. Now it is time to add these functionalities, or like the fetch request in the front end. So like instead of using postman, we'll just click that send button and it's gonna send the message. Or when we refresh the page, we will call this conversations get method to get these conversations, as well as this get messages function. And then at the end, the only thing that we need to add is gonna be the scikit.io, and which is not gonna be really hard. Now with this, it is time to go back to front end and connect these two. Now that we have implemented our endpoints, it's just time to use them in our front end. So now we don't need to use Postman because we just tested them in the Postman. It's working fine. Now it's time to use it. So we'll go inside the chat page, and here we are displaying some conversations and also this message container. So we're gonna go step by step, and first we're gonna fetch the conversations, and then we will just move on. So let's go in the chat page. So I said that we're gonna fetch some conversations. So for this, we will use a use effect on the on mount. So I will initialize it like this. And now here, let's have a function that is gonna just say that get conversations. So let's say get conversations is going to be async function. It's going to have try catch, and in the catch we would like to show some toast, which is going to be like an alert. And for that, we already have something called our hook, which was the use show toast, which is going to return us a function that is going to be show toast function, and we're going to call our hook, so use show toast, and it is coming from our hooks folder. So let's auto accept this, but this is not going to be curly braces around it because it's just a default export. And then here in the catch, we'll say that show toast is going to take the title, which is going to be error, and then the error message, which is going to be the description, and then the status, which is going to be the error. And then here in the try, we will say that const res, we will send a fetch request to our endpoint, which was /API/messages/conversations. And it was a get message, get method. So I'll say const data await res.json to get that JSON data. And if we have any error, so data.error, we will show a toast with this error message. And then what are we gonna do? We'll just return out of this function. And then here we might want to hold it in a state, but for now let's just console log it to see if that's working or not. And then here let's put this show toast function to get rid of that warning. And now we have created the function, but we never called it. So here let's say get conversations and just call it. So I'll save this, and then let's just format this a little bit, and then I'll save this. Here, let's take a look at our console. So this account is logged in as John, and we have a conversation, and it is with Jane because we just created that in the Postman. So the last message is from Jane that says, "Hi John, please answer to my messages." And we have two participants, so John and Jane. So it is working fine. Now when we just refresh this, so in the first maybe 1 second or half second, it is in the loading state. So for that, let's create a state for this, and we're gonna show our loading skeletons. So let's say loading conversations, and initially it's just gonna be true, right? And use state is we'll just import it. And then here finally we will just say that either we fail or we success. We want to have this loading state as false. And now here we'll just say that if we are loading the conversations, just show us 5 this loading skeletons. And otherwise we will say that if we are not loading the conversations, we want to show some conversation like this, maybe just have 1. And now let's test it out. So I will refresh this page, and for a second we're gonna get loading skeletons on the left, and then once this data is being fetched, it just switch with this conversation. Now here we might want to say that so we might want to store these conversations in a state, and then here we're gonna say that conversations.map, and for each of them we're gonna call this component. But wait a second, are we gonna just store these conversations in a classic use state, or are we gonna have it as a global state? So in our case we're gonna go with global state. The reason is because we might want to use this conversations state in multiple components. So I don't want to pass it from here to, let's say, to conversation, and then maybe also to message container. And inside the message container, maybe we might want to use it in the message component or message input component. So instead of creating that state in the chat page and then send them as a prop into this component, what we're going to do is that we're going to create a atom, which is going to be global state, and then we will basically just fetch it with it's going to be available for us with only one hook. So we'll say that use recoil state, right? This was the hook is coming from recoil, and then we're going to have the state and then setter function of that state. So that's why we're going to use a atom for this. I will go inside the atoms file, and folder, and then we'll just say that messages atom.js. So here let's import atom from the recoil, and then we will say that export const messages atom, and that is gonna be conversations, right? Conversations atom, because now we're implementing the conversations. And then let's call this function, and here it's gonna have a key as well as the default value. In our case it could be an empty array, because in the initial state we're not gonna have any conversation. So I will save this file here, and then we're gonna call it up here. So I'll say that const conversations and then set conversations, which is going to be coming from use recoil state. and we're just gonna pass the atom that we just created, which is gonna be the conversations atom. So now we have so this conversation state is available to us, and once we fetch this here, we'll just say that set conversations to this data, which is gonna be that array. So if we just save it here now, we are gonna have that in our state. And let's give this set conversations to here so that we don't get this warning. And then, so since we got the conversations in a state, so let's just map it. So I will delete this for a second, or maybe I'll just cut it. And here we're just gonna return that conversations dot map for each conversation. So let's say conversation, we are going to return this thing, right? And we need to give a key for this component. Let's say conversation dot underscore id, and let's just send the conversation itself. So conversation. Now here inside the conversation component, we're going to take it as a prop conversation. Now if we want to show the username here, we can't come here and say that conversation dot participants, and now this has two users and we want to choose the other user, so the user in the other side of the conversation. So now here, let me just show you what I mean. So now I am logged in as John Doe, and let's say this is Jane. I want to get the user profile picture of the Jane as well as the username of the Jane. But in our conversation array in the participants, we have both ourselves, which is John Doe, and we also have the Jane Doe. So here we might want to use some maybe filters to just remove ourselves from here. But what I will do is I will only send the other user in the backend. So we're gonna go inside the message controller. So it's gonna be here where we send the conversations. So here, as I said, we are just gonna remove the current user from the participant list. So remove the current user from the participants array, and we're gonna just do this for each conversation. So let's say conversations dot for each. We're gonna take each conversation, and now we are gonna just filter it out. So here I'll say that conversation dot participants, and we're gonna get into this participants, we're gonna filter it, and basically we'll just, okay, I'll just accept this. And so here basically we're just removing ourselves from this participants array. So previously we had, so let me just shrink this here in the participants. So we had two items, right? The first user was, let's say, Jane, and the other one is John, and we're gonna remove ourselves, which is gonna be John in this case, and we are only gonna have the other user, so the user that we are chatting with. So this is basically what we are doing to just make it easy to work in the front end. So if we just save it here, and then let's just comment this out for a second. We could save this file here, and let's refresh this page to see if that works. Now in the participants array, we should only have one user, and as you can see, it's gonna be the Jane because we just removed ourselves from this array. Now let's get into the conversation.jsx, and from this conversation we're gonna get the user. So const user, you could say that conversation.participants, and it's gonna be the first item that in the array. So this is gonna be the user that we're chatting with. So we could also get the last message. So const last message, and it's gonna be the conversation.last message. And now we're gonna use these. So here I will uncomment this. Okay, so here we're just gonna say that user, so this is gonna be the username, right? User.username, and then for the image source, okay, this was the verified image, and then what are we need here? It is going to be that the last message. right? We could just say that last message and show this. I will save this here now, and we have an error. Let's take a look. Probably it's just with the naming. Objects are not valid. Okay, last message dot text it's going to be, because let's just take a look here in the console. When we got the last message, it is an object and we need to get the text. So I will save this here now and it should be working fine. Okay, so as you can see, the message is kind of long, and what I want to do is just to truncate it. So I will use substring method for this, and I will say that if the text dot length is greater than, let's say, 18, and we will say that last message dot text dot substring, we could use slice as well, but I'll just go with the substring. We will get the 18th element, and then 3 dot, and in the else case, so if it is length is less than 18, we will just show the message as it is. So if we just save this here, now we should get that 3 dots after the, so the length should be 18 now in this case. And now we could do one more, so how to say, like we could do one more improvement. And if we are the one sending the message, maybe we could have like check mark here so that we know the last message is from us. So for that reason, we could come here and create a like curly braces, and for that we need to get the current user, which is going to be the user that logged in. So const current user, we'll say use recoil value, and then pass the user Adam in it so we don't have any suggestions. So let's get it manually. So import user Adam from our user Adam user right? And now we're gonna say that if the current user dot underscore id is equal to the last message dot sender, right, which was the id of the sender. Okay, so if this is the case, which means that we sent the last message, and in this case we're going to show an icon that's going to be as check to all, and it's coming from I think so the React icons, but in the else case we'll just show nothing. So let's import this, and it's gonna also have the size of 16. So let's go up here and then just import it. Okay, now I think we can just save this file and let's take a look. So this message is from Jane, but let's log in as John from our database, I mean in the Postman. So I will go into login, and then this is gonna be John Doe. The password is gonna be from 1 to 7. And I will send this. We are logged in, and now let's send a message to Jane. So let's get the ID of the Jane. Here let's get the profile. So let's say Jane Doe and send this. We got the ID. I will copy this and let's take a look. We're gonna send this to Jane. So let's say hi Jane. We could delete this. Let's say how's it going, and now I'll just save this send this message, and then let's refresh here, and we should see that check mark because the last message is coming from John, which is us that is logged in, and that's it. So since we are the logged in, I mean since we are the one that sends the last message, we got this check mark icon. Also, we are missing one more thing, which is going to be the user profile picture. So here in this avatar, we had the source as this broken link, but in our case, we will just say that user dot profile pic, right? And this user is coming from this participants list. So let's save, and hopefully we're gonna get the profile picture of Jane. Now let's send a message to Elon Musk as well in our Postman. So in this here, we're gonna get the ID of the Elon Musk, let's say. So let's get the profile of him first, and let's send this. We're gonna get the ID in this here. I'll paste it, and let's say hi Elon, how's it going? And I'll send this. Now message has been created. So now when we refresh here, we should get that conversation as well. And now we are getting the username, profile picture, the last message. So every data about conversation is here. Now, when we click to this, it should open up here, right? And it should fetch the messages between us and this conversation. And if we select this one, it should change this box with the messages that we have between us and this user. For that, we are also going to have a state, which is going to be selected conversation. So you might think that we will also need a use state for this, but on the contrary, we're actually going to go inside this messages atom and we're going to create a global state. And it's just like, believe me, it is really convenient to use it like this because we have multiple components and we don't want to pass them as a prop. So here we'll say that export const and let's say selected conversation atom. So it's just gonna be an object for the selected conversation. So initially, let's first just call this. Let's give it a key that is gonna be maybe selected conversation atom. Oops, we have it here. And then in the default case, now it's gonna be an object and it's gonna have an ID. Okay, this is gonna be ID of the conversation. And then we're gonna have the user ID, which is gonna be the ID of the user that we are chatting with, the selected conversations user ID. And then here we're gonna have the username. So if we select the conversation between us, so if I click to this one, the username is gonna be Elon Musk. The user ID is gonna be the ID of Elon Musk, right? And then here, let's have it as an empty string, and eventually we'll also have the user profile picture, and it's gonna be an empty string as well. So I'll just save this file. Now let's try to modify this state in our conversation.jsx. So whenever we click to a conversation, so let's get this. So on click, we're gonna set that state. So here, let's say const selected conversation, and then set selected conversation is gonna be from use recoil value, not the value, I'm sorry, it should be use recoil state, which is gonna give us the setter function as well as this state itself. And let's pass this atom, selected conversation atom, and when we click to this, we're gonna have a asynchronous, anonymous function. And then here we'll just call this set selected conversation method. So here it's just gonna take an object which is gonna have this underscore ID, which is gonna be the ID of the conversation. Then we're gonna have the username, user profile picture. So let's just go one by one. So it's gonna have the user ID and pass user ID, user profile picture, and username also. So now let's console log this selected conversation. So let's say console log, and here let's say selected conversation, and then pass this variable. Now I will save this and take a look here. So the selected conversation is now empty. I will click to this one. Now it should be selected as conversation between us and Jane. So selected conversations username is Jane, the ID is ID of this conversation, and the other data that we have here. So now let's change the background depending on that. So I will come to here and I'll say BG is gonna be if the selected conversation ID is equal to this conversation ID, then we will just call this let's say use color mode value hook, and then just pass our colors. So if we just do this, we're gonna get a warning or kind of like an error that says that okay, so what is this we're getting? Okay, so here we are having an error that says React hooks must be called not conditionally. Okay, here this is a problem, and in order to solve this, hopefully Chakra has a solution, which is going to be const color mode. We will just say that use color mode but not the value. Okay, so we'll call this hook and then call it like this. That is going to give us a function. So here we'll just say that color mode should be like this. And for the colors, I think so maybe Okay, that looks good to me, at least for now. I will just save this and let's take a look. So we have a problem that says color mode is not a function. And why is this? Maybe we are importing this in a wrong way. So use color mode that is coming from Chakra. That's right. And what is this use color mode? Okay, it's here. Okay. So the color mode is not a function. It's my bad. I'm sorry. So we are gonna check it like this. So this is not a function. It just determines that if we are in the light mode or not. So we'll say if we are in the light mode, right? We are gonna have this background as, let's say, gray 600, and in the other case, we're just gonna have it as gray dark. And now we could just wrap this here, okay, so that it looks a little bit cleaner, but it should be working fine. So what we did here is that we just determined if this is the conversation that is selected. If this is the case, we're gonna change the color depending on the light mode or dark mode. If you're in the light mode, this is gonna be our background color, and if you're in the dark mode, this is gonna be our background color. And if this is not the selected conversation, we're not gonna have any background color. Okay, now I hope this makes sense, but this is what it is. So let's just make this 400, and now let's test it out. So here I will refresh this, and now if I select this one, now do you see like the background has changed even if I am not in the hover mode? And if I click to this, now the background of this is been changing, and it just indicates that now we're in this conversation. Now in the initial state, let's refresh. So none of these conversations has been selected. So we shouldn't be showing anything here. Instead, what we created something for that is gonna be here. We have this kind of like that says select the conversation to start messaging, that like boilerplate, so to say. And here we'll just say that if we don't have any selected conversation, right? So selected conversation, we're going to say, so dot underscore ID if we don't have a selected conversation, and then we're just gonna render this guy here, right? This flex. And let's get this state, and this is why we are using this as a global state, so it's just really convenient to use it. So const select conversation in the setter function from use recoil state, and pass this atom in it. So here what we're going to do else is going to be if we have a selected conversation, and then we're going to show this message container. So I'll just cut it for a second, and I'll just say that if we have a selected conversation, and then show this message container. So we can save it here now, and okay, we got a warning because we're not using this, but we can ignore this for a second. And then here, so this is the initial state. I'll just refresh. So we need to select the conversation to start messaging. So when I click to that, it should change this with that message container. As you can see, we have just this message container on the right hand side. Okay, so now it is time to fetch these messages, and it's gonna be inside the message container. So we're gonna go inside the message container.jsx, and we're gonna have a use effect that is gonna be running in the initial mount, at least for now. So here let's have a function get messages. It's gonna be async, and then we will have a try catch. In the catch we will call our showToast function. Let's import this const showToast from our hook, and then here let's say showToast with the title, error, and the status. And then here let's put the showToast to get rid of that warning. And then now we're gonna say const res. So we're gonna call this fetch function, but our endpoint was, if you remember, it was API slash messages slash the ID of the other user. And in our case, we have this ID of this other user in our selected conversation atom. So we are gonna call it like this, but this is wrong. So it's gonna be selected conversation dot user ID. So this is how we are storing that in this state. Now let's get the state up here. So it's gonna be const selected conversation, and set selected conversation from this items folder and call this hook. Now here, if we select the conversation of Jane, the selected conversation is gonna be that conversation, and we're gonna get the ID of the Jane. So now it is gonna be working fine with this endpoint. So we're gonna get a data const data awaits res.json. And if we have any errors, so if data.error, just show to us and return out of this function, but otherwise let's just console log this data. So here we should pass the selected conversation dot underscore ID. I mean, yeah, it should be user ID, but so we could just have it like this, or let's just put the user ID. Okay, so let's take a look in the console what we're gonna see. Let's refresh. Clear out the console, and when I click to this, we're gonna get selected conversation, but we don't see this. Okay, because we didn't call this function at all, right? We created it, but we never called it, so the function has never been executed. So get messages, it should be. And now let's take a look in the console. We got 3 messages between us and Jane. So the first message is that says, "Hi John." It is sent it by Jane, and the other message is also from Jane that says, "Hi John, please answer to my messages." And the last one is from John that says, "Hi John, hi Jane." Yeah, that's basically it. Now we would like to show them in this message container. And also what I want to have is a loading state so that we can use these skeletons that we created, right? For that, I'll go here, I'll say const loading messages, maybe we could say, and in the initial state it's gonna be true as well. Let's import the use state, and then here I'll say finally, just say that this is gonna be false. Okay, the loading is false, and to hold the messages we could use a state, and for that we don't need to have any global state, because we're not going to use this message state other than this component. Maybe we just pass this once to down, but it's just going to be fine in our case. So here let's go. Okay, so once we fetch it, so we'll just delete this console log and we'll say set messages to this data, which is going to be that array of messages. And then if we are loading the messages, show this skeletons. In the other case, let's remove all these. We're going to just hold once. Okay, I'll just cut this, and then I'll say if we are not loading the messages, then just say that messages.map for each message, just return this message component. So oops, we just remove. Okay, so we just lose all of them. I'll just say message. We're gonna have a key message.id, and then also pass the message. In here we should be closing this like this. Okay, so also this message was accepting a prop that called own message. Depending on that, we're gonna see the message on the left, right? On the left or on the right. So how are we gonna check this? So we need to get the current user. So right, I'll just say that const current user. You could say that use recoil value and pass the user add a minute. So here we'll just say that if the sender is the current user, so current user dot underscore ID is equal to message dot sender, and that was an ID. If this is true, then it means that own message is going to be true as well. So let's go to inside this component, and then we have the own message. And if this is the own message, we're gonna render here, but in the else case, we're just gonna render here. So let's get the avatar. This avatar is the profile picture of the other user, which we can select it from our state. So it was selected conversation, and it's gonna be coming from this state. So let's import this and then this hook as well. So the avatar source is gonna be selected conversation dot profile user profile picture, and this is gonna be the profile picture of the user that we are. Okay, this is gonna be the profile picture of us. So how we can get this, it's going to be again const user use recoil value, pass the user atom in it, and then let's just change this with here. So user dot profile picture, should it be? I don't really remember, so let's first console log this. Okay, so I'll just remove it here. Oops, it's not working. Okay, let's just have it as a string. I don't remember. I just need to console log this. Console.log the user. And then here, let's take a look in the console. What are we getting? So I'll just select the conversation. User atom is not defined. Maybe it is here inside the message container. Let's import this. And then here I will select this one. This is the user that we're getting. Okay, it is just profile picture, profile pic. So here the source is gonna be user dot profile pic, which is gonna be the profile picture of the current user, which is us. So let's take a look here. Now this is the profile picture of us and the profile picture of Jane. If I select this one, we're gonna see the profile picture of us, and we don't have any messages from Elon Musk, so that's why we're not seeing that. So let's change the message content as well. So here we'll just say that we need to get the message as a prop, and then we will just change this with that message. Let's say message dot text. Take a look here, and yeah, that's it. We also need to change this here as well. So message dot text. So we'll just show the message content, and as we can see, it is in the descending order. I mean in ascending order, right? This is the oldest message and this is the latest message. I said that I will mention once we get there, and now we are here. So here, once we get the messages, so this should be actually 1, not -1. Okay, just bear this in mind. If this was -1, then the messages would be in the reverse order. Let's actually test this out. I will refresh here and let's select this conversation. And do you see, like, this is the latest message that we sent, but it is at the top. So that's why this is just not make any sense. So let's just have it as 1 and close this controller. And we have one more thing to fix. So in this header, that should be the name of the Jane and then profile picture of the Jane, which we can get it from the state that we have for the selected conversation. So we're gonna go inside the message container where we have the message header. So we have this state. So let's just replace this. So we're just gonna say that selected conversation dot username, and then for the source we'll just do the same. So selected conversation dot user profile picture. I will save it here and it should be working fine. If I click to this, it should change at the same time, and we are not getting any loading states. Okay, didn't we use it? So if we are loading the messages, show this skeletons, right? And initially this is true, so we are loading the messages once we call this function, right? Even before we call it. So let's just have it here as well. I don't know why it does that, but let's say set loading messages to be true in the initial render. So also let's say that set messages to be an empty array when we first try to fetch it. And here, if we just refresh and try to do this again, okay, now we have that loading state. If I click to this, we're also gonna get the loading state, and then once it is being fetched, we're gonna just display it in the screen. So we have 2 more functionalities left before we get into Socket. So the first one is gonna be once we click to this, we should send a message and display it here. And also the other functionality is gonna be we should be able to search for a user in our conversations. So let's start with this, and then we're gonna get into the search box. So we called this component as message input, if I remember correctly. Okay, it's message input. And here the only props that we need to send is gonna be this set messages sender function. And here, once we click to that send icon, we're just gonna add this latest message into this messages state. That's why we are passing this setter function. So that's all we need to send into this component. So let's go to message input.jsx, and here let's get that function. So set messages, and we're just gonna use it in a second. And when we submit this form, let's say on submit, if I can type it correctly, on submit. So we'll just say that handle send message. It's going to be our function that we're going to create. And also we should pass it here. So on click to this right element, which is that icon. So on click, we'll just call this function. And also we could just say that cursor is going to be pointer to just make it a little bit cooler. So we'll create our function. So const handle send message. It's going to take event, and if event dot prevent default, so that it doesn't refresh the page once we submit this. And now here we have to just put this input value in a state, right? Input value in a state. So const, we could say message text. So it should be maybe message text. It's just better naming, I think. Message text. Let's import the use state. And then what should we have else? Let's go to inside the function. So we'll just say that if the message text is null, we'll just return out of this function. We will not try to send an empty message to the database. But in the else case, we'll have a try catch. And in the catch, maybe we could show a toast. Let's first import this. So const show toast, use show toast, import the hook, and then pass the title, description, as well as the status. And in the try, we'll say const res, and it's gonna be await fetch. Now here, what are we gonna do is gonna be fetch post method, right? And our endpoint was API messages, and that was it. So we'll just pass an object, and then it's gonna be the method of post. It's gonna have the headers, and now the last part is not correct. We're accepting a text, right? Or let's take a look. I don't remember. Inside the message routes, let's go message controller. So when we send a message, we're accepting a recipient ID as well as a message from the request body. So here should be message, not text. And then also we should have this recipient ID, which is going to be the ID of the user that we are chatting with, which you can grab it from this selected conversation. So let's import this const. I think we're only going to use the state, so I will say selected conversation from use recoil value, and import this, import the use recoil value as well. So yeah, we pass the recipient ID as well. And then after this, we could say const data, which is going to be the res.json. If we have any error, we'll just show it and then return out of this function. But in the else case, we will just say that set messages, which is our function, and we will just take the previous messages and then append the last one that we just have, and we're just gonna put it at the end. So this will allow us to add that message in the UI and display it. So we could save here, and we have an error because that should be async. Maybe I will just save this again. Okay, so here we could save this as well. So now let's test it out. And for that, I will first open up my MongoDB. I signed into my MongoDB account to see the messages in our collection. So let's take a look in the messages. Now, so far we only have 4 messages, right? And now let's send a message to Jane. Okay, let's say, hey, test, and then just send this. I will click to that, and it looks like it didn't work. I'll just send this again. Okay, we have, it is not working. Let's take a look at here if this is the case. Okay, it is not working for some reason. Inside the message input, we call this handle send message on submit, and then we call try catch to our endpoint, which is API slash messages. Method was post headers. We got the body, which was JSON stringify of message, and then the recipient ID. And here, let's just console log the data. I don't know why this doesn't work. Let's try here and to just make sure if this function is working or not. Okay, so I just realized while typing this, it is because we never set this message. That's why whenever we call this function, this is empty, so it'll just return out of this function. So we'll just go on change, and we'll just say that take the event and then set message text to event.target.value. Okay, this just happens to the best of us, right? And then we'll just take the value even though I am not the best of us. So we'll just accept the message text. I will save it here. Now that should be working fine. So let's go here and I'll just say refresh first and then come here and let's say testing and just send this. Okay, so we got the message here, and let's refresh here to see if we are getting the fifth message. And there we go. So it's at the end that says testing. Now after we sent the message, we want to remove this. So we just want to remove this from here, and the way to do this is going to be just resetting this set message text. We could just say set message text to an empty string. So set message text, I'll just accept this. And we have one more problem. So even though I sent the message from here, now it just didn't update here to the latest message, right? So for that, we could again use that selected conversation, and it's gonna be, we're gonna use the set conversations. So not this one, but it's gonna be the, let's say const set conversations. It's gonna be that array. So we'll just say use recoil set state, and then just call this atom into that. But this should be, let's take a look in our atoms. I don't remember the name. It is gonna be this conversations atom. Okay, I'll just paste it and import this. Now here we just want to update the latest message in here. So we'll just say set conversations, and we will just take the previous conversations. Okay, let's say previous conversations, and then here we are gonna update that. So let's say const updated conversations, and it's gonna be the previous conversations dot map. We're just gonna take each conversation until we find the current one. So conversation, we'll just say that if the conversation dot underscore ID is equal to the selected conversation ID, then we will just change the last message. Okay, so just open up here, return an object, spread all the conversation data. So conversation, and then what we're gonna do is inside the last message, we will change the text as well as the sender. So text is gonna be the message text that we type into this, so into that input, and then the sender is gonna be just data.sender. So we could take this after here, right? Because we're using this message text here, and then we are just resetting it. And eventually after, so here we will just say that return updated conversations, and we also need to, after this if, we should just return the conversation as it is. So what we did here is kind of like complex, but it is not actually. So we call this set conversations, we find the previous conversations. Okay, this just gives us in as a first parameter, and then we just map through this and we find the current conversation that we are chatting with, and this is what we're doing. And for that conversation, we are only going to change the last message field, and yeah, that's it. So that will update our user interface. So I will save it here now, and let's refresh this page, and then let's try to do this again. So here I'll just say testing 2, and if I send this, it's gonna be here, and also it's gonna update here with this latest message. So I will press enter. Now it's updated here as well as here. So it's gonna work if I try to send this here as well. So let's say test Elon, and if I send this, it's gonna update here as well as here. Now let's finally add this search functionality. For this, we are gonna go inside the chat page, I believe. So here, let's say on submit, what we are gonna call is gonna be, let's say, handle conversation search, which is gonna be our function that we'll create now. And for the input, we will have a state, let's say on change. But first, let's create a state for this. So let's say const, maybe searched. Okay, what should we say? I don't know how to call this. I'll just say maybe, yeah, search text. Okay, search text, set search text. It is just gonna be an empty string initially, and then on change of this, we are gonna just set it. So let's say on change, call this, and take the event set. So set search text, it should be like this, and then we'll just say that e.target.value. And on the button, we are also gonna say on click, right? We will just call this handle conversation search function. And then what should we have else? I think we should also have a loading state. So I'll just say const, maybe searching user, and set searching user. Initially it's going to be false. Once we click to this button, or once we submit this form, it is going to be true. So let's say is loading to show that spinner. It is just going to be our state that we just created, which is searching user. And initially it is false. Now let's create our function after this use effect. So I'll say const our function name, and async is going to take the event event.prevent default. And then here we'll just say that set loading, set loading, or maybe set searching user to be true. And then after, we're just gonna have the try and catch. In the catch, we should call this show toast. I will copy here and then paste it. And in the try, we will first get the username, which is in our state that we have like search text, right? So for this, I'll say const ras, and it's gonna be await fetch. Let's get this template strings, and then we'll say slash API slash. Now, how are we gonna get the username? So, okay, once we search this user, so let's say I search for Zuckerberg. Once I search it, I need to get the profile picture of Zuckerberg if there is, and also the username of Zuckerberg. And the only way to do this is going to be our endpoint that we created for the users. So API users slash profile, and then slash the search text that we have in our state. And this is going to give us a data, okay? And we'll just say await res.json. And instead of calling this data, maybe we could say like searched user, right? And you can just rename this however you want. I think in this case, I'll just go with searched user. And if we have an error, we will show this in a toast. And otherwise, now we will just implement different if cases. So the first if check is going to be if this user is trying to message themselves. So we're going to say if searched user dot underscore ID is equal to the current user. So do we have the current user in this file? Okay, we don't have. So let's just get it. Const user, let's say current user, which is user that is logged in. So we're gonna get it from this atom and import this, and maybe we should just put these recoils here, right? and then the use states up here, and then show toast at the end. So just to format this. And then here where we were, so we were here, and then we'll just say that if the search user ID is equal to current user dot ID, then it means that we are trying to message ourselves. So let's just put a comment. If user is trying to message themselves, and these should be I, like this. And in this case, we will just show a toast that says you cannot message yourself, and then just return out of this function. So let's just save and try to see if it is working or not. So we need to import the use recoil value here, and it should be working fine now. So I am logged in as John, so I'll just search for John Doe, and if I search it, it's just gonna say you cannot message yourself. And now this is loading forever because we didn't change the state. So let's go here after the finally, in the finally, it will just say set searching user to be false. Now if we try to do this again, so it's gonna be like, I will just click to this for a second, it's gonna be loading, and then once we get a response from the backend, it is now not loading, right? So another if case is gonna be, I already have a conversation with Elon Musk. So if I search for him, and if I search it, it should, like, once I search that, it should open up this search box, right? Or the message box. And if I search for Jane, which I already have a conversation with, it should immediately open up this message box and fetch the messages. Now this is going to be our second if case, so we will put it here, and let's put a comment. So we'll just say if user is already in a conversation with the searched user. So this is just the perfect comment that we can get, and we'll say if. Now how are we going to check this? Is going to be conversations dot find we could use, or some as the copilot suggests, but here we'll say we're just gonna go each conversation, and in the participants list we're gonna check if this is the searched user, right? So ID of the first participant, which is gonna be the user that we are chatting with, if it is the ID of the searched user, which means that we have a conversation with this user. And then we're gonna go inside, we are just gonna call our setter function, which is gonna be set selected conversation, and then we're gonna have an object, and it has underscore ID, user profile picture, and I think that's it, or maybe the username as well. So let's just take a look. So it's gonna have a underscore ID, and this underscore ID is gonna be the conversation ID, which we can find it in this conversations array. And so I'll just auto accept this. That should be pretty straightforward now. And then for the user ID, we're gonna get the search user's ID, which we fetched it here, right? So if I search for John, this searched user is gonna be John, and we're just getting the ID of him, and then we're gonna get the username and the profile picture as well. So now let's save this, and before that we could say that just return and don't do anything else. Okay, so I will save it here now. Let's try to do this. I'll refresh. So I'll search for Jane Doe and press enter, and as we can see, it is just working as expected. So the functionality is really basic, but code might look a little bit complex, so let's just quickly reiterate. When we search for a user, we just check if this user is trying to message themselves by comparing the IDs. And if this is the case, we said that you cannot message yourself. And we had another if check, which is for if user is already in a conversation with the search user, then we are gonna check it like this. So we go inside the conversations array, we try to find a conversation that has, in the participants array, we have this searched user. And if this is the case, this if will run, and then we will just set this selected conversation with this user's conversation. So we're gonna go and we'll just say Elon Musk. If I search it, it is gonna open up here, and we can just switch between all the conversations that we have. So let's just refactor our code a little bit, and as the saying goes, your code probably shouldn't have any comments, or you should just try to avoid it as much as you can. And in our case, we could just delete this comment, which is like if user is trying to message themselves. So instead of this, what we can do is we'll just create a constant that is gonna say messaging yourself. So let's say messaging y is going to be uppercase yourself, and we're going to just take this if check, cut it, and paste it here. And here now we're just going to say if messaging yourself, then just show a toast and then return. Now we can just delete this comment, and our code is pretty self-explanatory, right? We don't need any comments. So it is just like an English sentence in this case. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. I will just say that const conversation already exists. So already exists, and I will cut this line. So from here up until the end, and then I will paste it. Now we could just delete this comment, and we'll just say that if conversation already exists, then set this selected conversation with this existed conversation basically. And then this is the exact same thing that we have here, right? It is now this is identical to this constant. So I'll just delete here, and I will just say that conversation already exists and get the ID of it. So now that should be working exactly the same, which is refactor our code. So refresh, and let's try to do this again. So I'll search for Jane Doe and search it. We got this message box. Let's search for Elon Musk, search it. We get the this message box with Elon Musk. So let's get search for John Doe, which is the current user, and we should get an error that says you cannot message yourself. And now we're gonna have one last if check, and which is gonna be if we are searching for a user that we have not a conversation with. So in this account, we have never texted to Zuckerberg, and if I search for him, we should get the profile picture and the name of him. So as a conversation here, and when we click to that, we should get this message box. So what is this? So what are we doing here? It is gonna be when we search for it, we will just create a mock conversation. So it's just gonna be fake because we are not creating that in the backend. And it is because maybe I will just search for him, and if I don't send a message, it shouldn't be creating a conversation. So that's why we're just gonna fake it first by calling this search box basically. So let's go here, and after all these if checks, maybe we could shrink them. So this if check and this if check, right? And at the end, we will just try to create a mock conversation. So I will just say const mock conversation, now which is going to be an object, and the format is going to be exactly the same as a classic conversation that we have. So let's open up this object. So we'll just say that last message, we already have this field in a conversation. So the text is going to be, so text is going to be an empty string. Sender is also going to be empty string because there is no last message. And we will just say underscore ID. It could be a random number. In our case, it's just going to be date.now. And also, what are we going to need? We'll just have participant, right? So let's say participants. It's going to be an array, and it's going to have one object, which is going to be this search user. So ID, search user ID, username of this search user dot username, and then same for the profile picture. And now just to know that this is a mock conversation, we could also put a field let's say this is mock should be true, and we're gonna use this. Once we use this, I will just mention that and you're just gonna understand why we're adding this. And now that we have the mock conversation, right, what should we do is we'll just add it into our conversation state. So let's say set conversations. We'll just take all the previous conversations and then put this mock at the end. And let's just save and test this out, right? So I will say Zuckerberg and I will search it and boom. So we got this. It is here. If I click to that, we got an error which we will handle in a second. But now if I just can basically search for any user. So I will just search for Jennifer, which I don't have any conversation with. If I search it, I will just get her here. It is because what are we doing? We are creating a mock conversation with the ID, last message, which we don't have. And for the participants, we are just putting this user that we just searched for. And then we are updating our state so that we can see it in our in the front end. And the error that we are getting is going to be, I think, inside the message container. So here we are trying to get the messages. Now, when this is the selected conversation, what is happening? So it says conversation not found. It is true because this conversation is mock. We don't have any conversation, any message with Jennifer in the database. So in order to solve this, here we'll just say that before you get any message, okay, you'll just say if this selected conversation is mock, then just return, don't do anything. And that's why we added that mock field. So we'll just save this now and refresh, and let's just try to do this again. So I'll just search for Jennifer and boom, we got this. If I click to that, we don't get any error. Oops, we get. So let's just take a look why this is happening. So if the selected conversation is mock, so it is mock actually. So let's take a look. What did we do wrong? So mock, and so I don't know what is going on. So for that reason, I'll just console log this selected conversation. So console.log selected conversation. I will save it here and let's take a look. I'll refresh, search for Jennifer, and now clear out the console. If I click that, so selected conversation, it is from message container and we don't have a mock field. This is why we are getting this, right? So for some reason we need to have it, and we are setting this inside the conversation.jsx. So if we click to that, we're just gonna say mock is gonna be conversation.mock. So this is gonna determine if this is a mock conversation or not. So I will save it here, and then now this should be working fine. And let's, for the last time, refresh and let's search for Jennifer, and then let's clear here. If I select this, it is gonna have the mock field as true, and we don't get any error that says conversation not found. So let's just quickly reiterate what we did. Here, when we click to this, it is happening here in the conversation. It is this onClick function, and we say that the mock field is gonna be if this conversation has a mock field or not, and it's gonna be true if this is the mock conversation that we added into here. So if this looks kind of strange, I don't know how to explain this in a better way. Just pause the video and just think about it. Just try some examples until it just sinks. But other than that, this is basically what we are doing. Now this conversation is mock, but now if I say hi Jennifer and if I send the message, this is not going to be mock anymore because we just added this into the database. So even if I refresh this page, I should still get that conversation and the messages. Now with this, I think we have just completed all kinds of functionalities into this application other than the socket.io, which is going to be for real-time communication. And now let's just try to add it, and then I think this project is going to be completed. So now in our application, we would like to have some real-time events such as instant messages and online status of users. We would like to know if a user just logged in or they just logged out. And depending on that, we will just determine if they're online or offline. So if we want to have some of these real-time events, there is something called WebSockets that we need to consider. And there is also something called Scikit.io, which is a library that is built on top of WebSockets. And in most of the time, you would use this Scikit.io instead of using this WebSockets API, because this is more convenient to use and it provides more features than this WebSockets API. So this is like a low-level implementation of Scikit.io library. Now, I will just assume that you don't know anything about Scikit.io, or it is your first time to implement that in a React application, so I will just take it from scratch. So here, let's start with an example, and this example doesn't use any Scikit server, okay? And this has a disadvantage that we'll just discover in a second. So let's say we have this user that wants to send a message to this user. So what he is going to do is that he will create a message and send it to the server. And server will take this message and save it to the database. Okay, now if this user wants to check if he has any new messages, what he needs to do is he needs to send a fetch request to the database. I mean to the server, and server will just forward it to the database and check if he has a new message or not. And if this user wants to get the new messages instantly, he needs to send a fetch request in every second. So in 1 minute, it is just gonna be 60 fetch requests for only this user. Now just imagine we have multiple users, so this 60 count will be just multiplied by this number of users that we have. And then what is gonna happen? Our server will just crash because probably it will not be able to handle these many of fetch requests. So this is the drawback of not using WebSockets in a real-time chat messaging app. So let's take a look at the example that we are actually using a Scikit server. So this Scikit server is just built on top of our normal server, okay? So now this user wants to send a message to this one, and server just listens for any incoming messages. So once this user sent the message to the server, server will just take that and immediately send it to this user. Now this user didn't need to send any fetch request. And in the background, we can just take this message and save it to the database. Now we have the best of the both worlds. We take the message, immediately forward to this user, and then save it to the database in the background. And now it doesn't really matter how much user we have, it is just not going to be any fetch requests. Our server will just take the message and send it to the users. So this is the idea of using a Scikit server in a real-time events app, okay? So here we have a little bit more diagram. So the blue one is the server, the green one is gonna be our client, and this common area, which is the orange one, is the common area, okay? So here we have some methods that we're gonna use. So scikit.on is gonna be to listening for events, and we can use it in both client and server. And also we have another method that is io.emit. So we use it in the server and it just sends event to every user. So this is kind of look so complicated, but I'm just showing you that here, and once we get into code, so it'll just make a lot more sense and probably will just understand this. And then if we want to send an event to only one user, then we will just pass an ID into this method, which is io.to, the Scikit ID, and then we'll just emit. So kind of like it is calling to this method. Okay, so we're going to use all these methods when we get into the VS Code. And also let's take a look. I have something more here. Okay, so this is going to be for to getting online user. So there is two methods that we're going to have in our server. The first one is listens for the connection. When a user connects, this method will run, and we could do whatever we want to do in this part. Okay, this will take a callback function as the second argument, and we will just implement whatever we want. And there is also another method that listens for if a user just disconnects. So here again, this will take a callback function. After here, we'll just put a comma and get the callback, and then we could just do whatever we want to do. And then, so here, let's say this is our user, or this is just us. When we visit our React application, currently it is in the local host, our socket server is listening for any connection. And once we connect, this will call the callback, and then it'll just send an event with this method io.emit to all the users, and it'll just say that, hey guys, now we have this user and it is online. And when this user logs out, it is gonna call this callback that we have here, and then it'll just again send this io.emit to all the users, and it'll just say that, hey guys, now this user just disconnected. And depending on these events, we could determine, so we could change our client with that online status green dot or not. And this is io.emit that I mentioned up here. So io.emit sends event to every user. And when we use these methods, I will check back to this kind of cheat sheet just to make sure that we are doing that correctly. So this is gonna be it for the conceptual overview of Socket, and now let's get into the coding. So this is where we left our application, where we built a chat page and then we integrated it with this message controller functions. And now it is working pretty fine. The only thing that we are missing is gonna be that real-time events, and for that we're gonna need a Socket server. Let's go inside the backend and let's create a Socket folder. And inside the socket folder, we'll just have a socket.js file that is gonna just hold all the logic for our socket server. So in order to create a socket server, we need a package. Let's go to Google and type for npm socket.io. So this is gonna be the package that we're gonna use to create our server. And from the client to interact with that server, we're gonna need this package. So socket.io-client. But first, let's just set up our server. So I will just open up a new terminal, and then we're gonna go cd backend, and then we'll just say npm I socket.io. So it's gonna install this package for us. So it has been installed. Now we're gonna need a server from this package. So let's say server from socket.io. And then we need to create an HTTP server. So let's say import HTTP from HTTP module, which is a built-in Node.js module. And then we need to import the express. And now this is gonna be looking a little bit strange, but bear with me, I'll just explain every single line. So first we need to create an express instance, and then we need to create an HTTP server. So let's say const server, it's gonna be http.create the server, and then bind it with this express instance. And now we're gonna create our socket server. So I'll just say const io new server, and then we're gonna put this server into here. And what is happening here is that we are creating a socket server, and then we are just binding this, or we're combining it with this HTTP server. Okay, so now just imagine if we have a box and we have both of our servers into there. Now we are able to handle HTTP requests with this server, and then we are able to handle any kind of socket IO related thing with this socket server. And now this is gonna take an object to get rid of the coarse errors. So we'll say coarse origin, and we'll just say that our local host of 3000, which is our React application. And for the methods, we could just have get and post. And now let's, since we created our server, now let's listen for any incoming connections. So how can we do this? In the drawing, let's take a look. I think we had a method that is called io.onConnection, and then we have a callback function. We're gonna do anything that we would like to do inside that function. So let's say io.on, and this is gonna take a string. So let's say connection, and then there's gonna be a callback, which is gonna take the socket as the first argument. And this socket, you can think of it as if the user that just connected. So let's say console.log user connect it, and so let's show the socket ID. So socket.id, and at the end of this file we will export some stuff. So it's going to be this IO server and then the app, because we're going to use that in different files. So we need to go inside the server.js. So here we see that we already have an express instance, but now we don't need this anymore because we already created one in the socket.js. So we'll just say import our app as well as the server from socket folder. And now our application, our express app, is just working as it was before. You are handling the middlewares as well as the routes. But we're gonna change this last line, and instead of listening this express app, we'll just listen our HTTP server that we created. And now changing that app with this server variable, we are now able to handle HTTP requests as well as socket server socket related thing. So believe it or not, this is all that we need to do to set up a socket server. And now it is time to connect to this socket server that we just created. And once we connect, this callback will run, and inside the backend terminal, we're just gonna see that a user connected. So let's shrink everything, and then we're gonna go into front end. And here, let's kill this terminal and let's create a new one. We will just say cd front end and then npm install socket.io-client. So we're gonna press enter to install that package. And then now one common way of implementing sockets is to use context, where you just create a context folder. And this context is an API that is coming with React. And at this point, I just assume that you are familiar with it, but I will explain that in a high level overview. We're not going to get really into how contexts work, what that is, but I will just try to explain as much as I can, because it is out of scope of this tutorial. So we're going to create a socket context.jsx file, and then we're going to create a context here. We're going to create a socket instance here, and then we will wrap our application with that. Okay, and inside our application, in our entire application, we will be able to use that socket. So let's go step by step, and I believe you will understand. So let's say const socket context, and then it's going to be calling this function, which is coming from React. And then we need to export const socket context provider, which is going to be a functional JavaScript, functional component. And then here, so normally we would take the props, and let's just destructure this and get the children. And we're going to go inside. We'll just say return this socket, let's say socket context.provider. And now we're going to put our children between. So any value that we put here is going to be available once we wrap our application. So we're going to put a socket here, but for now, let's just put something, maybe let's say string of hi. And then let's go inside the main.jsx. And here, if we just wrap our application with that socket context provider, okay, so we're going to wrap our application with this. Now in our application, we are ready to use this value that is coming from here. And this is now hi, string of hi, but we're going to change it with our socket instance. So let's create the socket instance. And by socket instance, I mean that we will just connect to that socket server. We'll say const, let's first have it as a state, and initially it is just gonna be null. So let's auto accept this, import the use state. Let's give a little bit space for us. Now, in order to connect to a socket server, we could use a use effect in the initial mount. So it is gonna be like this. And we'll just say that const socket, and we're gonna get this IO function from the package that we just installed. So import IO from socket.io client, and this is gonna take the URL of backend or server. So it's gonna be HTTP localhost 5000. And now we could also put a query here as a second object. So this query is going to be the user ID that we would like to send, because we're going to need this, and you're going to see why we are needing this. So once we get there, I will explain that. So we're gonna have the user, so let's say use recoil value, and then pass the user atom into that. So if we have a user that is logged in, let's send the ID of that user. So just make sure that it is underscore ID. So here we could put the socket as the dependency array, and now we are just, okay, let's say set socket to this socket. Okay, so now we're just handling the connection, but what about disconnection? So for this, we can use the cleanup function in useEffect. So let's say return this arrow function, and we'll just say if we have a socket, if it is not null, then we'll just socket dot close once this component unmounts. And here we could also put the ID of the user as the dependency into this array. So I believe this is all that we need to connect to our socket server. So let's save here and let's quickly reiterate what we did, and then we will take a look at the terminal. So here we just created a socket server, okay, that was in the backend, and in the client we are creating a context. So we just create a context at this line 6, and then we need to have a provider around it, and it takes the children as a prop, and we are returning this context provider with a value, and we are putting this children in between. And in order to use these values that is we are returning, we need to go inside the main JSX and wrap our application with this context provider. And now by doing this, we're able to use any value that is coming from here. So let's have an object and let's just return the socket. Now we will be able to use this socket in our entire application with having a hook. In order to get that hook, we could just say maybe let's put it here, and we'll say export const use socket. So this is gonna allow us to use this socket, and we'll just say return use context and pass this socket context as a parameter. So now when we want to use this value, which is socket, we're just gonna call this hook, and it's gonna give this socket for us, which we will do in a second. But now let's take a look at our terminal. So we can see a user connected multiple times because we saved a lot of times. So I'll just save this for the last time, and let's clean up our console. So let's go to the localhost. Maybe I should clean it again. Now we're gonna go here, and we could just refresh this file, and then in the terminal we see user connected multiple times. We see that multiple times because in the use effect we shouldn't be having this socket, right? So every time once it sets the socket, and then it take a look here, so socket changed, and then it calls this use effect again. So if you just remove that, and I'll just save and then clean here, let's go to this again, clean again. Now if you go to here and if you just refresh, we're only gonna see that in the console once. Okay, a user connected, and this is the socket ID. Now whenever we refresh this page, the socket ID changes. Do you see, like, even though it is the same user, the socket ID changes on every login, and in our case on every connection. And for that reason we were sending this user ID, because we're going to store that in a hash map, and we will determine which user is online and which one is not. So let's implement that. We could shrink our console, but before that let's take a look if we handling the disconnection. So here, how are we gonna listen for disconnect method? So in our cheat sheet it was socket.on disconnect. So let's go here, we'll just have this socket.on, let's say on the disconnect, we're gonna call this function after comma, and maybe we could just say console.log a user disconnected, and we could just put the socket ID, or we could just delete that. Now let's try to do this again. We could clean up this console, and let's go here. I'll just, okay, that should be like this. Okay, I'll refresh. Now a user disconnected, because when we refresh that it disconnects. If we are connected in the console, that we can see user connected. If I just close this in the console, we're just gonna see that user disconnected. Let's go to the localhost again, and now it is user connected. So now we are just sure that our connection and this connection just works, and we are able to send real-time events from our client to our backend. And now let's implement online user status. So we need to store the user IDs in our server. So for this, let's create a hash map. I'll just say const user socket map, and it's going to be an empty hash map. So here we'll just have the user ID that is mapped to the socket ID of that user. So let's get the user ID, which we were sending as a query from our client. So we could just say user ID, we'll say socket, okay, socket dot handshake dot query, and then we're gonna get this user ID that we sent up here. So let's take a look. This is the user ID that we are sending. So we're gonna just say that if the user ID, okay, if it is not equal to undefined, let's say if it is not equal to undefined, then we're just gonna store that into our hash map. So let's just give a little bit space for us. So we'll say user socket map, put the user ID as the key, and then socket ID as the value. And now we updated our online user status, but now we need to send this to our client to update them. So we'll just say io.emit, maybe we could say get online users, let's say this is going to be the name of our event, and then we will just send an array of the user IDs. So in order to get that IDs, we'll just say object dot keys, which will convert this user socket map as to an array, and it's just gonna put the keys into this array. So the output is gonna be looking like this. We're just gonna have an array, and we're just gonna have the ID of each user. So it is taking the keys inside this object and converting them into an array. Now we are sending this event, but we are never listening for that in our client. So let's save this file here, and once we connect our application, we will just say that let's say it's going to be like socket.on, and we're using on. Let's take a look. Why are we using this on method in our cheat sheet? So it is socket.on listens for events both in the client and the server. Now we're in the client and we are listening for events that is coming from the server. So we'll say socket.on, and our event name was get online users. If we remember here, where is it? Okay, it's here. We are listening for this event. So let's say get online users, and it's gonna give us some online users, and we're gonna take these users and set it with our state. So now we don't have any state. Let's create one. So let's say const online users, and initially it's gonna be an empty array, and then we'll just say that set online users to this users that is coming from the backend. And let's in our client, let's say console.log this online users, and maybe we could put a comma here to just make sure this is online users, and we have a warning here. Let's put the online users into here, or maybe we could just delete that because we're just gonna remove that console log in a second. So let's save this file here, and then we're gonna go to our client. Let's go here and open up our console, and we see that now there is no online users. Let's refresh, and it is still empty because we're not handling that in a correct way. Let's take a look. No, actually, if you just put this outside of this use effect, it should be working because it is just one render behind. So let's refresh, and this is how React works. And now we got the online users array, and we have the ID of the current user, which is John. So I will open up a new tab. I'll go to localhost, and now in the console we see that in the online users we have John. So let's log in as, let's say, Elon Musk, and from 1 to 6 it is going to be. If we just log in, now the online users just incremented and the count is 2 because now we have the ID of John as well as the ID of Elon Musk. Now we were able to show that status here. Okay, so let's go to our VS Code. We're gonna send this online users inside this object. So let's say online users, and we're going to be able to use this state in our entire application. So I will save this file. We're going to go into the chat page, and here we're going to call our hook, which we had use socket. It was, I believe, yes, this is the correct name. We're gonna get the socket as well as the online users. So here we'll just say that inside our each conversation, when we display them, we will send a prompt. We'll just say if this user is online. So let's say is online, and it's just gonna say that taking from this online users array. So online users dot include, okay, if it include the ID of the participant of first one. So this is just checking if the user that we are chatting with is in this online users array. Okay, we're comparing the IDs. If this is the case, this is going to be true, otherwise it's just going to be false. We could save this file. We'll go inside the conversation, and we will take the is online prop, and then we are gonna cut this. Okay, we could just cut this avatar badge for a second, and we'll just say if it is online, then show this badge. So let's say if it is online, show that, otherwise just show nothing, which we could just put an empty string. And then if we just save this now, and let's take a look, and let's just test this out. So here we have this account. So let me just put them side by side. So now I just put them side by side, and we can see that now only Elon Musk is online, because here this is the account of Elon Musk and he is online, and John is also online because the account of his is this one, but Jane and Jennifer is offline. Now let's handle the disconnection. We're gonna go inside here, socket.js, and once we have a disconnect, we will just remove this user ID from our map. Okay, we're just gonna remove that from our hash map. Okay, we'll just say delete the user socket map of this user ID, and we just updated our state, and now we need to send this to client again. And how are we gonna send this? I'll just copy this line. We'll just send the exact same event, and it's gonna be this event where it just updates this so it updates this user socket map, and then it just returns that. And since inside our client we are listening for that, it'll immediately update this new users with this state. So here we could save here, and let's test this out. I will just put them side by side. So here we are. I will refresh both of the clients, and now if I just log out from this Elon Musk account, just closely watch here. Okay, I will log out. Now he's offline, and if I log in back, let's say Elon Musk from 1 to 6. Once we log in, this user is online now, and it's just working if we just log out again. So this is gonna be it for the online status. Now let's get into the instant messages. So we were sending this message inside this message controller, right? We were getting the message from the client with the receiver ID, and we were saving this message into our database. Now once we save that into DB, we can just immediately send that message to the other client as well, which is going to be the receiver. Now in order to send that to only one user, let's take a look at our cheat sheet here. If you want to send an event to only one user, right, we need to call this method, and we need to pass this socket ID into here as a parameter. Now how are we going to get the socket ID of a user? Which we can create a function for that inside the socket.js. So let's go here. Let's create our function maybe up here. Let's say export const. We could say get recipient. So let's say get recipient socket ID. Say socket ID. If I can type, we're gonna put the recipient ID here, and which is gonna be the ID of the user. Okay, this is gonna be the user ID, and let's just make this a little bit easy to read. I will cut it here, and then we'll just say return here. So we're gonna pass the user ID, which in turn will give us the socket ID of this user. Now we can save this file here, and since we're exporting this function, we are able to use that here. So I'll say const recipient, so it gives us an autocomplete. Let's take a look. So we're gonna get the recipient socket ID, and we are gonna call this function from this file, and then we're gonna pass this receiver's ID, which is we are getting from the client. Okay, here now we need this IO method. We'll say IO dot to, we're gonna put the receiver's socket ID, and then we're gonna call this emit, and now we are sending an event. So let's say new message. Okay, the name of our event is gonna be new message, and then we'll just send this new message. So this is gonna be it. Maybe we could add an if check to just make sure. Let's say recipient socket ID, if there is, then just send this event. And now inside our message container, I believe we were storing our messages, so it's gonna be here where we have our messages. So we're gonna listen for that event. So any incoming messages, we are just gonna grab them and put them into our message state. So here we could just remove this console log, and let's say use effect, and we're gonna call this like this, and then here we will just say that socket, and which we need to get it from our hook. So let's say const socket use socket. And then in order to listen for an event, remember it was socket.on listens for events both in the client and server. And now we are inside the client. So we'll just say socket.on listen for a new message. And once you get that message, we're just gonna put that into our state. So we'll just say set messages and take the previous messages and then put the latest one at the end. Now here we could save this file, and then there is one more thing that we need to add. Is gonna be once this component unmounts, we'll just we will just remove that listener to this new message event. Okay, we're not gonna listen for this once this unmounts. And then here I think it asks us for to socket. If we just put this, now let's just test this out, and I just save this file. So here I just put them side by side. I will go to localhost and let's log in as Elon Musk. So 126, now Elon is gonna be online once we log in. Okay, we're gonna go into the chat page. We're gonna select this conversation from here, and we get an error. Let's take a look. So it just says that socket.on is not a function, and it is coming from message container. So let's take a look here. Socket. Okay, we're getting the socket. Let's say once we have this socket, maybe we could check that for this. So once we refresh, save this, and let's put them side by side again. So now here I'll just select this conversation again, and we're still getting an error, and I'm not sure where this is coming from. So socket.on is not a function. Okay, I was stupid enough to destructure this because we are returning an object inside the socket context, right? Inside an object, we have both of these values, and now in order to get them, we should have an object around them. And this is what we did in this chat page. We are just destructuring them, but here I forgot. Okay, so we could just save this, and now let's test this out again. We're gonna go here. So this is the account of Elon, and this is the account of John. If I select this conversation from here, let's go to bottom, and I have added these messages off camera to test this out. So we're gonna go into this one, and here they are the exact same messages. So let's say hey Elon and send that. Now we got the message, but we just need to scroll a little bit, and here it is just real time. It says hey Elon from John. If I just send another one, let's say, and before we send that, we have a problem. Now even though from here we said that hey Elon, this last message updated, but here we didn't handle that. So still the latest message is how are you, which is this one, but now it should be updated to this latest one. So we're gonna fix that in a second, and let's say, hey John, and if we send that, okay, so now this has been updated here, and also we got the message, but this hey John, the latest message, did not update here. So it is not updating for the receiver user. So for this, we're gonna go in our VS Code, and it is gonna be inside this use effect still, and we can, I think we could just delete this one. And then, so after we set our messages, we're just gonna update our conversations last message. So let's get our setter function, which is gonna be const, it's gonna be set conversations, and then we'll just say that use recoil set state, use set recoil state it should be, and then we're gonna pass our conversations atom inside. So here we'll just say set conversations, get the previous conversations. Okay, we could just close that like this, and then we're gonna update these. So we'll say const updated conversations, and we'll just take the previous, and let's just rename this as prev so that we don't need to type that long. So previous dot map for each previous conversation. So let's say conversation, and for each of them we're gonna check if the conversation is the selected one. So we could say if conversation dot underscore id is equal to the selected conversation dot underscore id. If this is the case, we will just return an object with the conversation, spreading this conversation object, but we will just change the last message, which was an object. The text is gonna be this message dot text, and the sender is gonna be this message sender. But outside of this if check, it is gonna be the return the conversation as it is, and after here we'll just say return updated conversations. So this looks kind of intimidating, but this is the React syntax, where we are taking the previous state and we're mapping that to update some conversations. In our case, it's just going to be one conversation. We're going to find the selected conversation, and we'll just change the last message to this latest message. And then if this is not that conversation, we're just going to have them as it was, and then we will just update it with this updated conversations. And now this should be working fine. And there is one more thing, that once we send the message, we would like it to be just scroll to bottom. So let's first test it out if this is working, and then we're gonna add that scroll effect. So let's go to Chrome here. Maybe we should refresh both of the pages. So I will select Elon, select John, and from here we need to scroll to the bottom. So if I just select, if we just say, hey John again, now it is gonna be updating here and then here, and it should also update here, right, the latest message to this exclamation mark, and then it should update here as well. So I'll just send this. Now it has been here, message is here, it's updating here as well as here. So it's just working pretty fine. And now let's add that functionality. Once we send the message, it's just gonna scroll for us automatically. So one practical solution for this is going to be using useRef from React. So let's just say const, and we're going to get the useRef, and let's import that. Initially it could be null, and the way to implement this is going to be having a message ref, and we're gonna bind it to the latest message. So it is gonna be like this. So if this is the latest message, right, we're gonna bind it with that, and then once we get this component, it is just gonna scroll to this latest message. And then if we send another one, let's say test, and now this test message is the latest one, it is just gonna automatically scroll to this one. So we're gonna put a reference for this, and it's gonna be the same for in both sizes. Both sides. Okay, so we're gonna go here, and then we'll just say message and ref. This is the best name that I can come up with. And then we're gonna go here where we have these messages, Now we cannot put the ref here because this is a component. You can put them into a maybe HTML element, let's say. So I'll just say flex and wrap it like this. Okay, let's close this flex, and then we're gonna wrap this message with that. So we need to pass this key into this flex now because it is the new parent, and then we will just say that this is gonna be having the direction of column so that it is just looking as exactly it was before. So if we just save this here, nothing should change. We just see the messages in the direction of column. And then now this is the tricky part where we're just gonna add that message and ref. So we could just say ref, and we will just say that messages dot length -1, which is the latest message, if it is equal to this index of the message. So this basically checks when we are mapping these messages, just find the latest message and then put that ref into that. If it is not the latest message, just don't put any ref. And now we have binded our message ref. We can save this here, and we're gonna need only one last use effect. And if you are thinking that since we have a lot of use effects, this code looks ugly, I don't think so. This is what you have in general in complex applications. And our application is getting kind of complex because it has a lot of features. So here we're just gonna have one last use effect, which is perfectly fine. And then we will say that whenever this message's state changes, we're gonna run this use effect. And we'll just say that message ref, it's gonna be message and ref dot current, and scroll into view behavior is gonna be smooth. So if we just save this, and it's hopefully gonna be working, we could save and let's see if we have any warnings. So here we are never using this state, but I'll just come back to that in a second. So here, did you see that it immediately scrolled for us? Let's refresh. Now if I select this conversation, it is just gonna scroll for me up until to the latest message, and it's gonna be the same here. Now if I send a message, we could just say yo, scroll is working, and if we're gonna just send that, and it's gonna scroll both here and then here. Now I believe we have one problem, and let me just test it out. I think it is gonna have a problem, but I'm not sure. Let me just test it out. So if we just send a message to Elon Musk from here, let's say hey Elon, but here we are selecting this Jane conversation. Okay, if I just send this, now it is still shows that as if Jane messaged us, and this is the bug, so this shouldn't be happening. And the way we're gonna fix this is only one if check. So we're gonna come back to here. Before we set this message, okay, we could just cut this entire line, and we'll just say if the selected conversation that underscore ID is the message dot conversation ID. Okay, if we are looking to the selected conversation and message is coming from there, then update this state. So now that should be working fine. Let's test it again. We're gonna go here. I'll just refresh to just have the latest state. So I will select the Jane conversation, and from here I'll select the John. And now from here, that should be actually hey John, but let's say hey John, let's say blah blah blah, maybe just something random. And now if we just send this, we don't get that message in here, but it still updates this portion. And now let's fix that again, and I believe the fix is gonna be here when we just say conversation ID is equal to not the selected one, but we'll just say message dot conversation ID. So if we just save this, I believe it's gonna work. Let's test it out. Let's refresh both sides. Okay, we're gonna go here and let's select the Jane, but here we're just actually messaging to this account. So we're just sending message to John as Elon. Okay, from here we're logged in as Elon. So let's say test 1 2 3, and if we just send this, now it is only updating here on the left hand side, and we're not getting that message here. If we just click to that, then we're gonna see that message at the end. So this last part where we had some bugs was kind of tricky to implement or to understand, but I hope I did a good job on explaining them. And with this, I think we just completed the entire project where we just implemented a socket server from scratch, and now we have real-time events such as online users and instant messages. As always, as a programmer, it is your turn to add more features, more challenges into this application. Now, maybe you would like to extend this application by having group chats where multiple users can join. So I think I'll just wrap up this video here. If you learned something new or you just like this one, and if you want to support this channel, just please like and subscribe so that I can have more motivation to just continue with this channel. So with this, I'll see you in the next one.